maybe even more. Now, I know that sounds like a flashy headline, but it's a very real number that's at the core of a major legislative push. We're not just talking about your standard cost of living adjustment here. This is about big foundational increases being proposed from a bunch of different directions. And look, that number isn't just wishful thinking, it's based on the fact that there are literally dozens of bills floating around Congress right now. This isn't just one single long shot bill. No, this is a coordinated effort from many different angles, covering everything from Social Security, retirement and disability to SSI, and of course, veterans benefits. So to make sense of all this, we need a clear plan. Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into the major Social Security proposals. These affect the biggest group of people. Then, we're going to look at some really transformative changes for SSI and disability. After that, we'll cover the new enhancements being proposed for our nation's veterans. And finally, we'll bring it all home with the bottom line. What does all of this put together actually mean for you? Okay, let's kick things off with the big one, Social Security. The ideas here are all over the map. Everything from raising your monthly check across the board to getting rid of federal taxes on your benefits entirely. The potential financial hit here is, well, it's absolutely huge. So this is the number that's grabbing all the headlines, and for good reason. We're talking about an extra $200 a month, every single month. It comes from one of the most ambitious plans out there. And for millions of people, a flat increase like this would be an immediate life-changing boost. See, it's not a percentage that helps higher earners more. It's a flat boost that lifts everyone up, especially those who need it the most. This whole idea is part of what's called the Social Security Expansion Act. The main event, of course, is that $200 a month raise. But there's more to it. It also wants to change how the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, is calculated. It would switch to something called the CPIE, which is the Consumer Price Index for the elderly. The thinking is pretty simple. This index actually tracks what seniors spend their money on, especially healthcare, which could mean bigger COLAs every year. And, super important, the bill also deals with funding by making sure earnings over $250,000 are taxed, which would keep the whole system solvent for another 75 years. But a flat $200 isn't the only idea on the table. Another major proposal is looking at a percentage-based increase, specifically a 2% bump for every single person. Now, 2% might sound small, but it's a really big deal because it would be the first across-the-board increase like this, totally separate from the annual COLA, in more than 50 years. It's basically an admission that benefits just haven't kept up. This one is called the Social Security 2100 Act, and it's got a few different parts. So first, you have that immediate 2% bump for everyone. Then it adds another 5% boost for people who've been on Social Security for 15 years or more, recognizing that savings tend to run out later in life. Just like the other bill, it also wants to use that more accurate CPIE for COLAs. But maybe the most interesting part is the introduction of caregiver credits. This fixes a huge inequity, giving Social Security credits to people, mostly women, who had to step out of the workforce to care for a kid or a sick family member. It makes sure they aren't punished for doing that vital work. So, besides just adding more money to your check, how about letting you keep more of the money you already get? And that brings us to a number I think everyone can get behind, 0%. We're talking about the federal income tax that a lot of retirees have to pay on their Social Security. This plan would mean more take-home pay without even changing your benefit amount. A lot of people are actually surprised to learn this, but depending on your total income, up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can be taxed by the federal government. Well, the You Earn It, You Keep It Act would just get rid of that tax completely. For a ton of middle-income retirees, we're talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars back in their pockets every year. And it's paid for in a similar way to the other plans, by applying the payroll tax to incomes over $250,000. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about supplemental security income, or SSI, and disability benefits. The proposals here are, and I'm not exaggerating, some of the most overdue and potentially life-changing. We're talking about updating rules that literally haven't been touched in decades. I mean, just look at this. To get SSI, you can't have more than $2,000 in assets. That limit was set in 1984. 1984! And it's never been changed. It's a rule that basically traps people in poverty, making it impossible to save for an emergency like your car breaking down. The proposed new limit? $20,000. That's not just a raise, it's a total change in philosophy that would finally let people with disabilities and low-income seniors build a small safety net for themselves. And here's the kicker. This particular change has a really good chance of actually happening. The SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act has incredible support from both sides of the aisle. We're talking Republicans and Democrats sponsoring it together. Plus, over 200 organizations are backing it, including some you wouldn't expect, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's just a common sense update that everyone seems to agree on. But it's not just about savings. There are plans to seriously increase the monthly payment itself. Right now, the average SSI benefit is around $967, which leaves people way below the federal poverty line. The SSI Restoration Act wants to fix that by raising the benefit to 100% of the poverty level. That jump to over $1,700 a month, that's the difference between barely scraping by and actually having enough for rent, food, and basic necessities. And this quote really just says it all, doesn't it? It's not a small tweak. For the millions of Americans on SSI, this would be a complete transformation. It's about moving from a system that basically just manages poverty to one that offers a way out of it, closer to something like a living wage. And finally, for this section, we've got the marriage penalty. This is one of those rules that just makes you scratch your head. Right now, if two people on SSI get married, their combined benefit gets cut by 25%. They literally get less money as a married couple than they did as two single people. It's a rule that actively punishes partnership. So there are two bipartisan bills that want to fix this outdated, frankly unfair policy and just stop penalizing people for getting married. All right, now let's turn our attention to the folks who have served our country. When we talk about veterans' benefits, there's a pretty consistent, reliable annual increase. But there are also some new ideas designed to make the whole support system work better. For veterans, one of the most dependable numbers to watch is that annual COLA. For 2025, the projection is sitting at around 2.5%. While all these other proposals get debated back and forth, this is the one increase that veterans can usually count on to make sure their disability compensation and other benefits keep up with rising costs. It's really the foundation of their financial planning for the year ahead. And that's really the key word here, reliability. Unlike some of the increase to your monthly benefit from now on. And here's the heart of it, the big number, a proposed increase of $200 per month for every single recipient. That's a direct, across-the-board raise. An extra $200 a month isn't just a small tweak. For so many people, that's the difference between just getting by and actually falling behind. It's money for prescriptions, for keeping the lights on, for just having a little breathing room in your budget, month after month after month. And this chart just lays out the long-term difference perfectly. The tariff rebate, it's a one-and-done $600 boost. But the Expansion Act's $200 a month, that adds up to $2,400 over the course of a year. That is 4 times the financial impact, and that higher amount becomes your new baseline for every single year after that. I mean, the difference is just night and day. But hold on, because the Expansion Act goes even further. It's not just about raising benefits for everyone. It's also about creating a really critical safety net. The plan would establish a new minimum benefit, what they're calling an income floor, to make sure that no one who depends on Social Security is forced to live below the poverty line. So what does a number like this actually mean for someone's wallet? Well, the bill sets this new minimum benefit at 125% of the federal poverty line. In 2025, that would work out to about $1,630 a month. Think about that. For a retiree who's struggling on just $1,000 a month right now, this would be a raise of over $600 every single month. For the lowest earning seniors, a change like this would be absolutely life-changing. And there's one more huge piece to this puzzle. The Expansion Act would completely change how your annual cost of living adjustments, your COLs, are calculated. For years, seniors have been saying that their annual raises just don't keep up with what they're actually spending. And they're right. That's because the current formula is tied to an inflation index for city workers, not retirees. This bill would switch to a senior-focused index, one that gives more weight to the things retirees spend the most on, like healthcare and housing. The whole goal is to deliver bigger, more accurate annual raises that actually reflect the inflation you experience. Okay, we've just explored some incredible possibilities for bigger checks. But now we really need to ground ourselves back in reality. These are still just proposals. And in a divided Congress, as we all know, nothing is ever guaranteed. So let's talk about what you can control right here, right now. Look, it is exciting to think about an extra $2,400 a year. But it would be a huge mistake to start spending that money before it's actually signed into law. The most powerful tool you have right now isn't hope, it's knowledge and preparation. Really understanding your current situation is the key to navigating whatever comes next. Are these plans actually enough to secure your retirement for the long haul? They're a huge step, for sure, but they also shine a spotlight on this much bigger debate about the future of Social Security. The best thing you can do is stay informed, stay prepared, and keep planning like your future depends on it. Because, well, it does.
If you receive Social Security, SSI, or VA benefits, you really need to pay attention to what's happening in Washington right now. It's not an exaggeration to say there's a flood of new proposals, ideas that could seriously increase your monthly check and completely change the rules. So we're going to break it all down and figure out what this could actually mean for you and your financial security.
And when I say a flood, I mean it. To give you a sense of the scale here, we're talking about more than 80 distinct legislative proposals. Just let that number sink in. This isn't just one or two little bills. This is a massive, system-wide effort to reform and, in many cases, expand these absolutely critical programs. We're talking about everything from the dollar amount you get each month, to the rules about saving money, to whether you have to pay taxes on your benefits at all.
Look, this is not business as usual. The sheer volume of bills being debated right now is historic. We are seeing more legislative activity on this front than at any time in recent memory. And what that means for you, the beneficiary, is that this is probably the single biggest opportunity for real positive change that we've seen in decades. The conversation has hit a boiling point. Okay, 80+ proposals is a lot. It's kind of overwhelming, right? So the big question, really the only question that matters, is which of these ideas could actually put more money in your pocket? Which bills have a real shot of making it across the finish line, and how would they directly impact your monthly check? Well, that's exactly what we're here to do, to cut through all that noise and focus on the proposals that could genuinely change your financial future. All right, let's dive in. And before we even get to what's being proposed, it's super important to talk about the progress that's already been made. This isn't just talk. This movement is already delivering real results, with some major laws already signed, sealed, and delivered. These two wins really show that the momentum is real. First up, the Social Security Fairness Act. This is a huge deal for about 3.1 million public servants. We're talking teachers, firefighters, police officers. For years, their benefits were cut by these two really frustrating rules called WEP and GPO. Well, this law gets rid of those, restoring their full earned benefits. Second, there's the Elizabeth Dole VA Act, which is a major overhaul of the VA system. It expands support for caregivers and, crucially, helps get benefits to veterans much, much faster. The key thing here? These aren't just ideas anymore. They are the law of the land.
So, with those wins officially on the books, the stage is now set for even bigger changes. Let's sift through that massive mountain of proposals and pull out the true game changers, the ones that are being seriously debated right now that have the biggest potential to affect your benefits.
You can really boil all this legislative chaos down to three main ideas, three big goals. The first one is the most straightforward, just putting more money directly into your pocket each month. The second is all about fixing old, frankly ancient rules that actually penalize you for trying to save money. And the third is a really popular one, the idea of making your benefits completely tax-free. Okay, so let's tackle that first category, boosting your check. The biggest and most direct proposal here is called the Social Security Expansion Act. The concept is incredibly simple. The headline is a $200 per month increase for every single beneficiary. That works out to an extra $2,400 a year. But the bill actually goes further. It also wants to change how the annual cost of living adjustments are calculated, switching to something called the CPIE, which is an inflation index specifically for seniors, designed to be more accurate about their real costs. Now, beyond those direct payment increases, there's a huge focus on modernizing Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, and this is absolutely essential for the 8 million Americans who rely on it. And one of the biggest, most frustrating problems with the program is what's known as the savings penalty. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The rules are so out of date that they literally punish people for trying to save a little money for an emergency, effectively trapping them in a cycle of poverty.
You want to know how outdated we're talking about? The current limit on how much an individual can have in savings is just $2,000. That limit was set in 1984. It has never once been updated for inflation. Think about that. So if your car breaks down or you have an unexpected medical bill, you're just stuck. Well, a bipartisan proposal called the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act wants to fix this. It would raise that limit all the way to $20,000. That's a game changer. It's not about getting rich. It's about giving people the dignity to handle one of life's emergencies without losing their lifeline.
So when it comes to reforming SSI, there are really two different schools of thought moving through Congress right now. The first one, that bipartisan bill we just talked about, is laser-focused on fixing the savings problem, on letting people build a small safety net.
But there's a second, more ambitious approach called the SSI Restoration Act. This bill has a different focus. It says, let's not just tweak the rules, let's radically increase the monthly payment itself, with the goal of lifting recipients well above the federal poverty line once and for all.
And that brings us to our third big category of reform, taxes. You know, it catches a lot of people by surprise when they retire, the fact that your Social Security benefits can actually be taxed by the federal government. Well, there's a proposal with a fantastic name, the You Earn It, You Keep It Act, that aims to put a stop to that. The philosophy behind it is just simple common sense. You paid into the system your entire working life, so you shouldn't have to pay taxes on it again when you finally get your benefits back.
So how would it actually work? Well, it's a pretty straightforward two-part plan. Part 1, it would completely eliminate all federal taxes on Social Security benefits, period. For millions of seniors, that's an immediate direct increase in their net income. But of course, that has to be paid for. So Part 2 is the funding mechanism. Right now, there's a cap on how much of your income is subject to the Social Security payroll tax. This bill would apply that tax to all earnings over $250,000, making sure higher...
You know, today, we're going to put on our
You know, tens of millions of Americans depend on Social Security and
Today,
SSI.
we're going to dive
and
into
right now
some
there are
really
a couple
significant
of
proposals
major
that are on the
proposals
table right now,
that could
all
change those
designed to do
benefits
one
in a
thing,
really big
put
way.
more money
So we're going to break
directly
down the
into
hard
your
numbers
pocket.
and see what these
We're going to
plans
break
could
down the
actually mean
actual
for your
concrete
wallet, for your
plans
budget,
aimed at helping
and honestly for
seniors
your
and
peace of
anyone
mind.
on a fixed
Let's
income.
dive in.
We'll look at the exact
Just look at
numbers
this
and
number
what they
for a
could really
second.
mean for your budget.
$70.
So let's get into it.
Now, I want you to imagine that
this
after you've
quote right
paid your
here,
rent, your
this
electric
comes
bill,
from
your
real
groceries,
seniors
your
sharing
prescriptions,
their experience.
all the absolute
And
must-pays.
boy, does it hit home for a
This
lot
is
of
what you
people.
have left.
It's that feeling,
Not for the
right?
week, for
that
the
you're on a
entire
treadmill
month.
that's just going
What could you
faster
even do
and
with
faster,
that?
and no matter
Could you
what
grab
you
a
do,
coffee with a friend?
you just can't seem
Get a
to keep
birthday
up.
gift for your
So,
grandkid?
does that
What if your car
sound
gets a
familiar?
flat tire?
I'm guessing for
For
a
way
lot
too
of
many
you,
people,
it really,
the answer
really
to those
does.
questions
This isn't
is
just
a really
random
stressful
quote.
no
For
way.
so many, it's what you're living
And
day
that
in and
$70
day
scenario?
out. And that
That's not
feeling
just
of
some
always
hypothetical
falling just
exercise
a
we're
little
doing.
bit more
For
behind,
millions of seniors
that's the
and
core
folks with
problem we're gonna
disabilities who are
unpack
living on a
today.
fixed income,
And more importantly,
that
we'll
is
look
their
at the
reality,
potential
month in
solutions.
and month out.
All right, so
It's this
first, let's
constant,
really dig into the
grinding
problem with
financial
some
squeeze
actual numbers.
that forces them to
Because
make
this isn't
impossible
just a
choices
feeling,
every
you know? There's a
single
real,
day.
measurable financial
Let's break down
gap
exactly
that's
how
been
this
growing
happens.
year after year, and
So,
it's making it
on
tougher
average,
and tougher
a
to
Social
make
Security
ends meet.
recipient
Okay,
gets about
and this is where it gets,
$1,900 a month.
well, really frustrating.
Seems okay, right?
Take a look at these
but
numbers.
watch how fast it
In
just
one recent year,
evaporates.
the
Right off
Social
the top,
Security cost of
over a
living
third of it,
adjustment, the
poof,
COLA, your
gone,
raise,
just for
was
housing.
2.5%.
Then you add in the other
But
basics,
in that same
utilities,
year, the
groceries,
premium for
getting
Medicare Part
around.
B
But here's
jumped
the
up
real
by
budget breaker for so
6.6%.
many.
You see the
Healthcare.
problem, right?
We're talking over
The same government that gives you a
$550 a
tiny
month
raise with
between
one
general
hand
costs and
takes back an
prescriptions.
even bigger
And
chunk with
after
the other.
all that is said
Your
and
raise
done,
is gone before you
you're
even
left
see
with
it.
$70.
And look,
there
this
is
isn't
zero
just
room
a
for
one-off
error, a
bad
broken
year.
microwave, a
Over
new
the
pair of
last
glasses.
decade,
Forget
this
about it.
exact
That is the
kind
squeeze,
of imbalance
right there,
has
in
meant
black and
that
white.
your Social Security
So,
checks
just
have
how
lost
critical
about
is this income?
20% of
Well,
their buying
this
power.
chart says it all.
20%.
For a whopping
Think
40%
about
of
that.
seniors,
It
Social
means every
Security
dollar
makes
you
up
get
at
today
least
buys a
half
whole
of their
lot less
entire
than it
income.
did just 10
And then look at the
years back.
smaller slice,
All right,
14%.
so that's the problem.
For them,
It's pretty
Social
bleak.
Security is
But let's
basically
shift gears
everything they
and
have.
talk about
We're talking
solutions.
90%
We're gonna
or
look at
more of their
three
income.
major
So for
proposals
this
that are
group, it
aimed
isn't
at
just
putting
some
more
safety
money,
net, it's
actual
their entire
dollars,
livelihood.
directly
And that's
onto
why
your
any
benefit
change
checks.
to it, no matter
And
how
just to be
small
clear,
it
I'm not
seems,
making
has
these up. These
absolutely
are actual
massive
bills
consequences.
being debated right now.
Okay,
First up,
so with
we've
that
got a big
pretty
one.
stark
It's called
reality
the
in
Social
mind,
Security
let's turn to the
Expansion
potential
Act.
solutions
And
that
its
are actually
goal
being
is
discussed.
incredibly simple.
There are two key
Give
pieces of
everybody on
legislation
Social
out there
Security
designed
an
specifically
immediate,
to deal with
significant
this
raise
financial
to help
pressure
them
cooker.
finally catch up
The Social
with all these
Security
rising
Expansion
costs.
Act and the
So what's the
SSI
big idea
Restoration
here?
Act.
A direct, across-the-board
Let's look at what these
increase
two
of
acts would actually
$200
do.
every
On one hand,
single
the Social
month.
Security
And that's
Expansion
not just
Act
for
is pretty
retirees.
straightforward.
We're talking
It would
about
give an
for
extra
every single
$200
person
a
getting a
month to
Social
every
Security
single
check.
person
That
receiving
includes
Social
folks on
Security.
disability
That's a
and
flat
those receiving
increase of
spousal and survivor
$2,400 a
benefits
year.
too.
Pretty
Everyone
significant.
gets the boost.
On the other hand,
Now let's put
the
that $200
SSI Restoration
into
Act has a different
perspective, 'cause
focus.
it's a huge
It's about
deal.
supplemental
That's an
security
extra
income, and its goal is to
$2,400 a
pull
year.
recipients out of poverty by raising their benefits
Now
up to the
compare
official
that to the
federal
typical
poverty
cost
line.
of living
For some
adjustments
of our
we've been
most
getting,
vulnerable
which have been,
citizens,
maybe
that would be an
40 or
immediate,
50 bucks a
life-changing
month.
increase.
This proposal would
You
have
know,
an
when you
impact
strip
that's
away
4 or 5
all the
times bigger than
legislative
that.
jargon
It's a
and the
real
dollar
game
figures,
changer.
the
Okay,
mission
let's look
behind
at the
both
next
of these
proposal on
proposals
the
is
table.
actually really
This one
simple
is called the
and
Social
profoundly
Security
human.
2100
It's about
Act,
changing a
and it
life
really
filled with
hones in on the
constant
folks folks who are having
financial
the toughest
anxiety,
time.
where
We're
every
talking
single
about
expense
seniors
feels
who
like a
get the
potential
absolute
crisis,
minimum
into
Social
a life
Security
where people can
benefit and are
actually
often living
afford
well
what they
below the
need,
poverty line.
maybe plan a little
Get
for the
this. This
unexpected,
plan
and just
calls
live
for
with
a
a basic sense of security and
$660 a month
dignity.
increase,
To really
a
see what that
permanent one,
means, let's
for
look at a
those on the
real-world
minimum
example.
benefit. The
All
idea
right,
is to
so
lift their
all these
income up to
policies and numbers can feel a little
125% of the
abstract,
federal
so
poverty
let's
level.
make it
I mean,
tangible.
Can you
I want you to meet
imagine?
Margaret.
For
She's
someone trying to
72,
get by on
and
just
she
a
relies
few $100s
completely
a
on her
month,
Social
this would
Security
be
income.
absolutely life
Her
altering.
story is going to
All
show
right,
us what
proposal
this shift
number
from
3.
stress to
This
security
one gets to the
actually
real
looks
root of the
like on a
problem we
personal
talked
level.
about earlier.
This
That
quote,
tiny COLA that just
it
doesn't
just gets
cut
right
it.
to the heart of it, doesn't it?
Instead of just a
These
one-time
aren't choices
fix,
about
this
luxuries.
plan wants to
This isn't,
overhaul the
should I
system
go out to
so
dinner
it works better
or
for you
save for a
every single
vacation?
year. So
For
here's how
Margaret,
it would work.
and for
It basically
millions of
creates a
people
safety
just
net for
like
your
her,
COLA,
the
a
choice is
floor.
between two
You're
absolute
guaranteed to get
necessities:
at least
food
a 3.5%
or medicine.
increase, no matter what.
It's an
So
impossible
in
daily
years where inflation
calculation
is really high,
that just
you
creates
get
this
more, of
constant
course.
level of
But this
stress,
protects you from those
which,
years where
as
the
you can
COLA
imagine,
is so
takes
low
a
it gets
huge
completely
physical
wiped
and
out by
emotional
other rising
toll.
costs. So
Okay,
we've talked about
here's
your
the
Social
breakdown
Security
of
check,
Margaret's
but
monthly
that's not the
budget.
whole story.
Her total income is
There are also big ideas to
$1,650,
improve
but after
other
she pays for
programs that
rent,
so many people
utilities,
rely on.
food, and her
Let's take a
healthcare,
look at some
she's
really
left with
important
just
changes being proposed for food
$120
assistance.
for the entire
This
month.
one
That
tackles
has to cover
two
everything
huge
else:
frustrations with food
toiletries,
stamps,
clothes,
also
any
known
extra
as
doctor
SNAP.
copays. A
First,
single
it would raise
unexpected
that
car problem
minimum
would be
monthly
a complete
benefit from a
financial
measly
disaster. There
$23
is just no
to a
breathing room.
much more helpful
Now,
$75.
let's see what happens when we
And
apply the
second,
Social
and this is
Security
so
Expansion
important,
Act to her
it would
budget.
raise the
Her
asset
income
limit to
immediately jumps by that
$10,000.
$200.
That means you're not getting
up to
punished anymore for
$1,850.
being
And
responsible
look at
and
the
having a
incredible
little bit of
difference this
emergency
makes.
savings
Her main
tucked away.
expenses, like
Okay,
rent and
so
medicine,
all
they
of
stay
that
the same.
sounds pretty good,
But look
right?
at the changes she can
Lots of
finally
positive
make.
ideas,
She can
but-
increase her
and
grocery
this is a
budget by
big but.
$70.
While
That's the
all
line
this
item for
positive talk
dignity
is
right
happening,
there.
there's
It means she
another
can now
challenge
afford the
brewing,
fresh
a kind
fruits
of
and vegetables her
hidden risk
doctor's
you
been
really
telling
need
her
to
to
know
eat.
about.
But the
And it
biggest
has nothing
change,
to do
the
with the
real game
economy
changer,
and
is
everything to
this
do
new
with
line item,
paperwork.
an
So
emergency
what am I
fund.
talking about?
For the very
What's
first
this
time,
hidden risk?
Margaret can actually
It's
put
the
away
very real
$100
danger
each
that
month.
you could lose the
This
benefits
completely
you already
transforms her
have,
financial world
not
from
because
just
you don't
reacting to
qualify
crises
anymore,
to
but
actually
because of
planning
new red
ahead.
tape that seems
And even
almost
after all
designed to
that,
make you
she
fail.
still has
Let me break it down.
$150 left over.
We're talking
This
about
is
new
what
rules,
stability looks like.
especially for Medicaid.
So when we
You're now
ask
being asked to
what does
renew your
$200
benefits
really
every
buy,
6 months.
the answer isn't
That means you have
just
to
a
prove
list of
all
things.
over again
It's
that you're
the freedom to
eligible
not
twice
have
a
to make
year.
that
It's a
impossible
huge
choice
burden,
between
and
food
it
and
feels like
medicine.
it's designed to
It's
make
the ability
people
to
trip
plan
up.
for the future instead
One
of
missed
just dreading
deadline,
it.
one
It's
tiny
being able to
error
buy
on
a new pair
form,
of
and
shoes
boom,
without having a
you
panic
could be
attack.
kicked off.
But
And
really,
the
at
fallout
the end of
from
the
this
day,
could
what
be,
it truly
well,
buys
it's just
is the one
staggering.
thing that's
The
priceless:
prediction is that
peace of
17
mind.
million people,
That reduction in
that's
daily stress is
17
worth everything.
million, could
But
lose
the
their
impact
Medicaid
of these
coverage
proposed
because of this
increases doesn't
paperwork
just stop with
nightmare.
one person's
It's
budget.
a quiet way
It's
to
not
cut
just Margaret's
benefits
story.
just by
It
making
actually
them
creates
too
this
complicated
positive
to
ripple
keep.
effect that can make
Whew,
entire
okay,
communities
that was
stronger.
a lot to cover.
Here's
So
how
let's
that
take a
ripple
breath and
effect
just
works.
boil it all down
First,
to what
local
this
economies
really
get a
means
real
for
boost.
you, for your
Seniors
wallet,
tend to spend
and
that
for
extra
your
money
peace of
right
mind.
in their own
So
communities,
let's just run through
at the
the
local
key
grocery store,
takeaways.
the
On the one
pharmacy, the
hand,
corner
you've got
auto
these
shop.
major proposals on the
Second,
table.
and this is a big
potential
one,
$200
it can
a month
actually help
raise for
lower
everybody,
healthcare costs
a
for everyone.
$660 boost
Why?
for those who need it
Because
most,
better
and a
nutrition and
guaranteed
people taking their
3.5%
medication
minimum COLA
consistently
every year.
means fewer
Plus, real
expensive preventable
fixes to
trips
make
to
food
the
stamps work
emergency room.
better. But
And
on the
finally,
other hand,
it strengthens
there is
the
this
very
absolute
fabric of the
critical
community.
need to be on top
When
of your
seniors
game with
aren't
that
totally
Medicaid
consumed
paperwork.
by
You have to
financial
stay
stress,
vigilant.
they have the
And
energy
that
and
brings
the
us
freedom
to
to
the final
contribute
question,
more,
really.
whether
The
it's
Social Security
volunteering or
Expansion
just
Act, the
being active in
2100
local
Act, that
groups.
guaranteed COLA.
So you see,
These aren't
this
just
isn't just
dreams.
about
They
helping
are
one group
real,
of people.
detailed plans sitting
Investing in the
legislative
financial
files
security
right
of
now.
our
They
seniors
exist
and
on
those with
paper.
disabilities
So the
is
question
really
for
a
all of
strategy
us
for
is,
creating more
what's it going
vibrant,
to take to
more
move them from
stable, and
paper
more
into
prosperous
reality?
local
You've probably
economies
seen
for
the
all of
headlines
us.
buzzing around.
A senior's
Something
personal
about a new
victory over
payment for
financial
Social
stress
Security
becomes
recipients
a shared victory
Well,
for their
we're going to
entire
break down
community.
exactly what that's all about.
88%
It's a
of Social
proposal that's
Security
getting a
recipients.
ton of attention,
Today,
and we need to
we're
talk
going to
about
get
what
into
it could
something.
actually mean
Today,
for
we're
millions of
going to
people.
get into something
Okay,
that really
let's get
hits
right into
home
it.
for tens
Okay, so the
of
number
millions
at
of
the
people.
absolute
Social
center
Security,
of this whole
that's the minimum
conversation
benefit
is
at
this:
125% of the federal
$1,400.
poverty
And
level.
look,
this isn't
That
just
would
some
boost the current
random
minimum
figure
from
pulled
about
out of a hat.
$950
It is the
a month
exact
all the way
amount
up
at
to
the
a
heart
much
of a
more
new
stable
proposal
$1,500.
aimed squarely at people on
Just
Social Security.
let that sink in
so what
for a
is
second.
this really? Well, there's a pretty
57.9%.
influential
For
advocacy
someone
group
who
called the
spent
Senior
30
Citizens
years as a
League,
home health
and
aide
they're the
or farm
ones
worker
pushing
or a
for
child
what
care
they
provider,
call a
this is a
one-time
nearly
catch-up
58%
payment.
increase in their
Now, the key
retirement
thing to
income.
understand right away
It's a
is that this
direct
is not a
lifeline.
permanent
It moves
monthly
them from
increase.
deep poverty, not just to
It's
the poverty
designed
line,
as a
but securely
special,
above it.
one-shot payment
This is
to
one of
give
the
folks
most
some
powerful
immediate relief.
anti-poverty measures
But
in
that
any of
leads
these
to the big
proposals.
question, right?
All right,
Why
next
now?
up, we're going to
I
look
mean,
at
a proposal for
supplemental
a payment
security
this
income,
big,
or SSI.
it doesn't just pop up
Now,
out of
this
nowhere.
is a separate
It's
program
pointing to
that
a
supports the
much
most
deeper
financially
problem
vulnerable
that
among us,
advocates say has been
low-income
brewing for
seniors
years.
and people
So
with
let's dig into the why behind
and
this
the
whole thing,
SSI
and really
Restoration Act
the
aims
entire
to
argument.
completely
It all comes
overhaul
down
this
to one
critical
thing:
safety net.
the cost of
First
living
thing
gap.
it does is raise
Basically,
the benefit itself.
there's this growing sense
Here's a
that the
crazy
money
fact.
seniors
Right
are
now,
getting
the
just
maximum
isn't
federal
keeping up
SSI
with what
benefit
things
is actually
actually cost day
below
to
the
day.
federal poverty line.
And that gap is
This
getting
proposal
dangerous.
fixes that.
So to
plain
really
and
get a
simple.
handle on this
Raising the
gap,
individual
we've got to
benefit
talk
to
about COLA.
100% of the
You know,
poverty
the cost
level.
of living
And
adjustment.
as you can see, for
It's
a
that
single person,
annual
that's an
raise that
increase of
Social
over
Security
$300 a
recipients
month.
get. that. And
That
its
totals
whole
almost
job, its
$3,800
only
extra
job,
per year.
is to make sure your benefits can
this-
buy the same
this
amount of
is
stuff this
frankly
year as they did
revolutionary.
last year,
The
even
current
when
asset
prices go
limits
up.
for people on
On
SSI,
paper, it's
they haven't
supposed to
been
be a
updated
perfect
since
system. But
1984.
in the real world,
Can you
is it
believe
working?
that? They
Well,
basically
according to
force
people like
into
Shannon
poverty
Benton
and
from the
punish them for
Senior
saving
Citizens
any
League,
money at all.
the answer is a
The
big
proposed
no.
change would increase the
She
limit
talks
for
about
an
a sharp
individual
erosion
by
in what people can
400%,
actually buy.
from just $2,000
She's arguing
to
that those yearly
$10,000.
COLA raises
And for a
just
couple,
aren't
it's an
keeping up
even
with the
bigger jump
soaring
to
costs of
$20,000.
essentials. We're talking
So
food,
what does that mean
housing,
in the real world?
and a big
It
one,
means someone on
healthcare.
SSI could
And listen,
finally build a
this
small
gap is a
emergency fund
huge
without being
deal
terrified
because
of
of just
losing their
how
benefits.
much people
It
depend
means
on
they
these
could save up
benefits.
for a
I mean, look
reliable
at this.
used car to
For
get to
almost
their doctor's
40% of
appointments.
folks,
It
Social
means they
Security
could handle
isn't
a
just
major
some
home
of their
repair without
income,
going into
it's
debt.
all of it.
It allows
It's their
for a basic
entire income.
foundation of
So for
security
that
that's
group,
just
when the
impossible
COLA
right
doesn't
now
cut
under
it,
these
there's
ancient
literally
rules.
no other safety
And
net.
now
That's
we
it.
have to talk
Okay,
about one of
so if
the
we all agree the
cruelest
COLA
parts of
isn't
the
quite doing
current
its job,
SSI system,
the obvious
the
next
marriage
question is
penalty.
why?
It's
What's broken?
exactly what it
And that
sounds
question
like.
takes us
If
right
two
into
people
the
on
really
SSI
technical,
get married,
nerdy
their
heart of
combined
this whole
benefit
debate.
is slashed
It's
by
all
a
about a
full
disagreement over the
25%.
formula, the
The system
math used to
literally
figure out
forces people
inflation
to choose
for
between a
seniors.
committed relationship
Let's break
and their
this down
own
because it can get a
financial
little
survival.
confusing. Right
And let's
now,
put a
the
hard number
COLA
on
is
that.
calculated using
If two
something called the
people who are each getting the
CPIW.
maximum SSI
Now, this
benefit
index
get married,
looks at what
their
urban
monthly
workers
income
are
is
buying.
cut by
Things like gas for the
$471.
commute,
That's
new
over
clothes for the office.
$5,600 a year that
But
they
here's the
lose
problem.
just for
Advocates say
formalizing their
seniors
relationship.
spend their money
It's a direct
completely
financial
differently.
punishment for
They
love
spend
and
way less
commitment.
on gas
It's absurd.
and way more on
The
things like
SSI
healthcare.
Restoration
So they want to
Act
switch to a
does
different
exactly what
index,
its
the
name says it does.
CPIE, which
It
is
restores
specifically designed to
dignity by
track spending for the
completely
elderly.
getting rid of this
It gives a
penalty.
lot more weight to
A
those
married
crucial
couple
costs.
would get the same
And you might
total
be
benefit
thinking,
as two
is this just
individuals
some
living together.
niche idea?
There would be
Not even
zero
close.
financial penalty
When the
for
Senior
getting married.
Citizens League actually
Simple as that.
surveyed retirees,
So
the
we've
support
seen
for
these
this
big
change was
proposals to
just
increase benefits right
overwhelming.
now.
I mean, look
But
at
the
that
big
number.
question
A
is
staggering
always,
96%
how do we make sure
of
the
the people
system
they
stays
asked
strong
said,
for generations
yes,
to come?
the COLA
Well,
should
that's where our
absolutely be
third piece
based
of
on how
legislation
we
comes in.
actually
The
spend our
Social
money.
Security
And the numbers
2100
behind that
Act.
feeling
It's all about
are pretty
long-term
grim.
solvency.
You've got 1 in
So,
5 seniors
how is all
spending
of this
over
paid for?
$1,000 a
Well,
month
the main
just
funding
on
idea is to
healthcare
ask
alone.
the highest earners
4 out
to
of 5 feel like
contribute
the
a
official
little more.
inflation numbers are
Right
a joke
now, there's a cap
and
on
don't
how
match
much of your
what they see at
income
the
is
grocery
subject to
store.
Social Security taxes.
And then there's this.
This proposal keeps that current
13%
cap,
of seniors are
but then
trying
it
to get by
reapplies
on
the
less
tax
than
on all
$1,000
earnings
a
above
month.
$400,000
That's often
a
below the
year.
poverty line.
It just ensures
It's a
that those
tough
with the
reality.
highest incomes contribute
So
on a
this
larger
idea
chunk
of
of
a
their
one-time
earnings.
payment,
And
it might
here is
sound
the
kind
single
of
most
radical, right?
important takeaway
But if
on
you
the
look
funding.
back at our history,
This change
it's
would
actually
not
not a
increase
completely new
taxes for
concept.
99.6%
This whole
of
conversation
working
is really just the latest
Only the
chapter
top
in a long story of
0.4%
adjusting benefits
earners,
when
people
times
making
get
over
tough
$400,000 a
economically.
year,
Yeah, I
would
mean,
contribute
this idea
more.
definitely
For the
builds on
vast
stuff
majority
we've
of the
seen
country,
before.
your payroll
Remember
taxes
the Great
wouldn't change at all.
Recession back in
And
2009?
get this, the
Social
2100
Security
Act
recipients
also
got
includes a
$250
significant
checks
tax
then.
cut for
And just a
millions
few
of
years
seniors.
ago, there was a big
It
push
does
for
this
a
by
$200 a
raising
month
the income
increase.
level where your
And of
benefits
course,
themselves
we all remember
start
the
to become
stimulus
taxable.
checks, the
For single
economic
folks,
impact
that
payments
threshold
during the
doubles to
pandemic.
$50,000.
So you see, the
and for
idea of
married
sending
couples, it more
targeted
than
direct
triples
cash,
to $100,000.
it's been done.
This
So
is a direct
history
boost to the
shows us
take-home
it's
income
possible,
for millions
right?
of
The
middle-class
government
retirees.
can step in and send direct
Okay,
help
we've
when
looked at
things get
3
bad.
different acts with a
But,
whole
and
bunch
this
of
is a
different
big but,
provisions.
it's
Now,
really
for the
important
most
to
exciting
remember
part.
that just because
Let's
it
put it
happened
all together
before
and see what
doesn't
the
mean it'll
total
happen
financial
again.
transformation
Every
would
single
actually look
proposal,
like for
including
real
this
people.
one, has to
So
fight its
first,
own battle
let's
through
take a
the
look
current
at a
political
typical
and
senior
economic climate.
retiree.
Okay,
This is someone who's
so
getting
we've
the
covered the
average
what,
Social
the
Security benefit,
$1,400
and
payment,
maybe they have
we've
a small
covered the
pension
why,
or
the
some
COLA
retirement
gap,
income
and we've
that
looked at the
puts them in a
history. Now
modest
let's
tax
pull it
bracket.
all together.
When we
Where does
combine
this
that
proposal
$200
actually stand
across the
today?
board
And
increase
let's be
with the
honest,
tax
what are its
savings from the
chances of happening?
2100 Act,
You
their
really have to
financial
understand
picture
how
changes
something
pretty
like this becomes a
dramatically.
reality.
Their
It's
annual
a journey.
income gets a
Right
boost of
now,
up to
we are at the very beginning.
$3,900.
Steps 1
That's
and
almost
2.
an 18%
You have an advocacy
raise.
group making
It
a
provides
suggestion,
significant
and the media
relief
is talking
from the
about
rising
it.
cost
That's
of
great.
healthcare
But
and
for this to
just,
turn into
daily
actual
living.
money in someone's
Now
bank
let's look
account,
at someone
it
who
needs to
spent their
become a
life
bill.
in low-wage
That bill
work
has to
and is
pass
now
the House,
retiring on a
and it
minimum
has to
benefit.
pass the Senate.
This
Then
is
it
where
has
the
to be
impact
signed by the
becomes
president.
truly
That
life-altering.
is a very,
So
very
this
long
person
and
benefits
tricky
from
road.
multiple
All right, so
proposals
let's
all at once.
boil this
You've
whole
got the
thing
new
down.
higher
What are the
minimum
most
benefit
important things
plus
to
the
remember?
$200
Number
flat
1,
increase,
and this is the big
and
one.
it pushes
This
their
is
annual
just a
income up
proposal.
by
It
over
is not a law.
$7,000.
Number 2,
That's more
it's
than
designed for
60%
all
raise.
Social Security
This
recipients.
isn't just a number
That
on
means
a
retirement,
page.
SSI,
This is the end
and
of that
SSDI.
constant anxiety we
3,
talked about at
the
the
whole
beginning.
argument is that the
This
current
is what
COLA
lifting
formula
someone
is broken
firmly out of
because it
poverty
doesn't
and into
reflect
a
what
life of
seniors
basic
actually
financial
spend money on.
dignity actually
And finally,
looks like.
number 4,
And
the
for
fix
our
they're
final
suggesting
case
has
study,
2 parts.
let's look at the couple
Change
we
the
discussed
formula for the
earlier.
future
Two
and
people
give
with
everyone a
disabilities,
one-time
both on
payment to make
SSI,
up for the
who just
past.
want to build
That's
a
the whole
life
shebang.
together.
And all of this really leaves us
this is
with
the
a
most
much bigger,
profound
more
transformation of
fundamental
all.
question to
Right
think
now,
about.
the system
This whole
slashes their benefit just for getting
idea,
married.
it's just one
With these
possible
reforms,
answer to
their
a huge
individual
challenge.
benefits rise to the
As our
poverty
economy
line,
keeps changing
and the marriage
the cost
penalty
of
is
everything
eliminated.
keeps changing,
Their
how do we
combined
make sure
monthly
our most
income jumps
important
to over
safety nets, things like Social
$2,500.
Security,
That's an
are
annual
changing
increase
right
of
along
over
with it?
$13,000.
That's the real conversation,
It is a
and it's one we're
staggering
definitely going to be having for a
77%
long,
raise
long
that
time.
affirms
You
the
know,
right
if you
to
try
love,
to keep
to
up with
marry,
the
and
news
to build
about
a secure
Social
life together.
Security, wow. It's a
These
lot.
numbers,
One
they
minute you hear about
represent an
benefit cuts,
incredible
and the
vision
next
for a
it's all
more
about
secure
increases.
America.
It can make
But
your head
they are
spin,
not just
right?
ideas
So in
on a
this
piece of
explainer,
paper.
we're going to slice
These are
through all
active
that
legislative
confusion.
proposals.
We'll get right to the
So
facts,
the big question is,
separating what's
how do
actually
we get
happening
from
right
this
now
vision
from what's
to
just
an
being
actual
proposed for the
reality?
future.
Well,
All right,
the path
let's
to
just
any
ask
law
the
has a
big
few key
question
steps.
right up front.
A bill
Is
has to
Social
pass through
Security
committees in both
sending
the
you
House
more
and the
money?
Senate.
Well,
Then
the
it has
answer
to
is a
get
little
a full vote
complicated.
in both
For some people,
chambers.
yes.
If
And
the
for
versions
others,
are different,
it's still
they
a
have
big
to be
debate.
reconciled
There's
into
one
one.
major change
And
that's
then
already
finally,
law and
that
has led to
single version goes to the
significant
president
payouts
to
for
be
a
signed into
specific
law.
group of people.
And
For
one of the most
everyone else,
compelling
there are
points
other
in all
big
of
ideas
this
on the
is
table.
this.
Our
While
goal today
Washington
is
might
to
seem
show you
completely
exactly
divided,
what's what.
the American public really
Okay,
isn't.
so here's our
There's
roadmap for
overwhelming
today. We'll
bipartisan
talk about some
support
big
for
Social
expanding
Security
Social Security.
changes, then
A
the
recent poll
real
found
money
that
that's happening
84%
right
of
now,
all Americans
what
are in
else is on
favor,
the horizon,
including a
a
staggering
totally different
78%
vision
of
for the
Republicans.
administration,
For the public,
and
this
finally,
isn't a partisan
what this
issue.
all means
It's
for the
just a
future of your
common sense
benefits.
priority.
Let's jump
So
in.
we end with this question.
Okay.
Beyond
Section
all the
1,
dollar amounts
real
and the
money
percentages,
right now.
these proposals
We're going to
represent a
start with a
potential
change
future
that's
with a
already
lot
a done
less
deal.
fear and
This
anxiety
isn't
for
a
millions
proposal,
of
it's a
people.
confirmed law that
The
is
real
already
question they
having
pose
a
is about the
direct
kind of
financial
society we
impact
want
on
to
a
be,
specific group
one
of
that honors its
retirees.
elders,
And when I
supports
say
its most
financial
vulnerable,
impact, I mean
and
it.
ensures a
Check out
lifetime
this
of
number,
contribution is met with real security.
$6,710.
Ultimately, these numbers
That's the
ask all
average
of us to define what
retroactive
financial
lump
dignity
sum
truly
back
looks like for
payment that
America.
millions of beneficiaries
Today,
are
we
receiving right now
taking a
because
deep
of this
look
new
at
law.
some huge
I mean,
proposals
wow.
that are on the
Of course,
table
some
right
people
now,
get more,
aimed
some
at
a little less, but that's the
completely
average
reshaping
payment
Social
going out.
Security
So
and
you're
supplemental
probably wondering,
security
where
income,
is all this money coming from?
SSI.
It's because
And
two
listen,
really
these
old
aren't just
and
little
frankly
tweaks
pretty
around the edges.
controversial rules
We're
have
talking about
finally
a
been
whole
repealed.
new
You
vision
might have
for
heard of
what
them.
retirement
WEP,
and
the
disability
windfall
support looks like in
elimination
America.
provision,
So
and
let's
GPO,
break it
the
all down.
government pension offset.
You know,
For
this quote
decades,
from the
these rules
source
actually
material,
reduced the
it just
Social
hits the
Security
nail on the
benefits
head.
for certain
It
public
perfectly
workers.
frames
Think
this entire
firefighters, teachers,
conversation.
and other civil
This isn't
servants.
just about
The
spreadsheets
Social
and
Security
budgets.
Fairness
It's
Act
about
has
dignity,
now wiped
it's
those
about
rules
security,
off the books.
it's about the kind of
And it all
promise we
happened
want to make
pretty
to our
fast,
seniors
really.
and our most
When
vulnerable
you look
neighbors.
at the timeline,
It's a
the
really
bill passed the
powerful way to
House
think
back
about
in
the
November,
human side of
got
all the
through the
numbers
Senate
we're
in
about to get
December,
into.
and was officially
So
signed
here's
into
the game
law
plan.
on
We're going to
January
break down
5th.
three major
Right
pieces
after
of
that,
proposed
starting in
legislation.
February
The
and
Social
March,
Security
the
Expansion
Social
Act,
Security
the SSI
Administration
Restoration
got
Act,
to work
and the Social
distributing all
Security
those back
2100
payments.
Act.
Now,
We'll look
it's
at
super
exactly what they
important to
do,
understand
who they're
who
going
this
to affect,
applies to.
and, of
The
course,
people
the big
getting these
question, how
payments
they
are the
be paid.
retirees,
First up, let's
survivors,
talk
and
about the
spouses
Social
who were
Security
directly hit by
Expansion
those
Act.
old weapon
Honestly,
GPO
this
rules.
is the cornerstone of the
and this
whole
is a big
vision.
but,
It's
that's
the
not
foundation for
everybody.
a lot of the
In
other
fact, it's
changes,
a pretty
and its main
specific
goal
group.
is super
Only
direct,
about 3 to
to provide
4% of all
immediate,
Social Security
substantial
beneficiaries.
financial relief to
So the
every
vast
single
majority of
person
people,
receiving
including
Social
most
Security
folks on
benefits.
SSDI and SSI,
The
were
headline
never
feature of
affected
this
by
act
those
is a
rules,
real
which
game
means this
changer.
particular
A
change
proposed
doesn't apply to them.
across-the-board increase
Okay, so
of
that's the Fairness
$200
Act, which is
per
done,
month.
but that's
And let me
not
be
the end
clear,
of the
this
story.
is not a
Now
one-time
we're looking
check.
ahead to what's
This
on the
would be a
horizon.
permanent boost
Let's dive
added
into some
to
other
every
big
single
legislative
monthly
proposals
payment
that
for
could
everyone,
mean more
from
money
retired
for a lot more
workers to
people down the
on
road.
disability.
Right now, there are really
So
two
what does
big
that look like
ideas
over
floating
a
around
year?
for a future race.
Well, it
On
adds
one
up to an
side, you have
extra
the Social Security Expansion
$2,400.
Act, a
For any
proposal
household
from
on a
Senator
fixed
Bernie
income,
Sanders.
that is not
It's
just
pretty
a number.
straightforward.
That's
Give
real
everybody
security.
on Social
That's
Security an
money
extra
for a
$200
car
a
repair you
month.
didn't see coming.
To pay for it,
It could cover
raise
months
taxes
of
on the
utility
highest
bills.
earners.
Frankly,
On the other
it can be the
side is a a more
between
targeted
just
approach.
getting by
The idea
and
here is to
facing
send
a
those extra
real
checks
crisis.
only to the lowest income
Okay,
beneficiaries.
let's put some real
The
numbers
theory
to
is that
this.
they're the most likely
The
to spend
average
that money
Social
right
Security
away, giving the
benefit right
economy
now
a
is
more
about
immediate jolt.
And just to put
$1,838
that
a month.
first idea
With
into
this
real
change,
numbers,
it would
an
jump to
extra
over
$200 a month comes out to $2,400
to
a
be
year.
exact. That's
That
an
would be a
11%
serious
increase.
increase for
Think
every
about
single
that.
person
For
receiving
someone on a
benefits.
fixed
But,
income,
and
an
it's so
11%
important to
raise
remember
just
this,
like that
this is still just a
absolutely
proposal.
massive.
It has not been
It
passed
provides
into
some
law.
serious breathing
Okay,
room
let's
in a budget
shift
that is
gears
often stretched
completely.
way too thin.
There's a whole other vision
Next
for
up
how
is
to
a change
improve
that
Social
sounds a little
Security,
technical,
and this one has
but
nothing
stick
to
with
do
me
with
because
passing
this
new
is
laws
so
for benefit
important.
raises.
It has
Instead,
to do
it's
with
all
the
about making
annual
the
cost
system
of living
stronger from the
adjustment,
inside
or
out
COLA.
through better
Right now,
management
the
and
formula
different
is
tax
based on how
policies.
younger urban
And you
workers
can really
spend
see
their money.
this viewpoint
The problem?
summed up in
That
this
formula
quote from
really
former
doesn't account
President
for the
Donald
massive
Trump.
healthcare
He
and
says,
housing costs
I
that
signed
seniors
one
actually
big, beautiful
face.
bill and
So
allowed
the
no
proposal
tax on
is to
Social
switch to
Security
something called
for
the
our great seniors.
CPIE, which
So
is
for
an
this
index
approach, the
based on
key
how
isn't
the elderly
necessarily
actually
bigger
spend.
checks from the government,
This would
but
make
letting
sure
seniors
benefits
keep
keep up
more of
with
the
the
money
real
they already
inflation
have
seniors are
by cutting
experiencing.
taxes on their
And
benefits.
over a long
And
retirement,
folks who
that could
support
mean
this
thousands
administrative
and thousands
approach,
of extra
they point to
dollars.
some pretty impressive
This
stats.
is another
For
truly
example, the Social
transformative
Security
part of the
Commissioner, Frank
Expansion Act.
Bisignano,
It sets up a
highlighted how they
brand new,
slashed
much
call wait
stronger
times by a
minimum
whopping
benefit.
73%.
And the goal here is simple,
They also talk
but it's
about rooting
profound.
out waste and
If you work
fraud
for
by
30
clearing
years, paying into the
24
system your
million
whole
names of
life,
people
you
over
should not
120
retire
years
into
old out of the
poverty,
database,
period.
launching
The new
24/7
minimum would be
online
set at
access, or removing
125%
hundreds of
of the
thousands
federal
of
poverty
ineligible
level.
individuals
For
from the
millions
system.
of people who've
The whole
spent their
idea
lives
is that a
in
more
tough,
efficient,
low-wage
fraud-free
jobs,
system
this
is
would
a
be an
stronger
absolute
system for
lifeline,
everyone.
ensuring a basic level of
Wow.
dignity they've earned.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Okay,
and
let's
some
shift
very
gears
different
now
ideas
to
for
the
what's next.
SSI Restoration
Let's try to pull
Act.
this all together
This one
and
is
figure
all
out,
about modernizing the
what does
rules
this all
for
mean for the
supplemental
future of your
security
benefits?
income.
Okay, so when
SSI
you boil
is a
it all
critical
down, there are
safety
really
net for
three
about
distinct
8
paths we've
million
looked
of our
at.
most vulnerable
First, you have the
Americans,
Fairness Act.
but
The status
a
on
lot
that
of its
one is
rules are
confirmed
just
law,
wildly
and it's
out of
already
date.
providing
We're
back
talking
pay and
decades
raises
old.
for that specific group
The
affected by
first
WEP
big
and
change
GPO.
here is a
Then you have the
direct,
two big future
substantial
ideas. There's
increase
the
in the
legislative
benefit
path,
itself.
passing new laws to raise monthly checks for lots of people, and then there's the administrative vision, which is all about strengthening the system from within through efficiency and tax cuts.
This proposal would
And really,
raise
that
that
brings
benefit
us to the
all the way
ultimate
up to
question, doesn't it?
100%
Bigger
of the federal
checks
poverty level,
versus a stronger
which is about
system. What's the right path
$1,255 a
forward?
month.
Should the
That's
main
an
goal be
extra
getting more money into people's
$312
pockets every
single
month to deal with the rising
a
cost of living?
33%
Or
boost
should the
designed to
priority be
pull
on
people
creating a
out of
more
poverty,
efficient,
full stop.
streamlined, and fiscally
Now,
sound
this
system
proposal
for the long
also
haul?
tackles one of the
There's no
most
easy answer,
ridiculous
but whatever we
SSI
decide
rules on
will
the
define the
books,
future of Social
asset limit.
Security for tens
And
of
I'm not
millions of
exaggerating when I
Americans.
say this. It has
Think
not
about
been
this number,
updated since
$370.
1984.
According to some recent
The
congressional
current limit of
reports,
just
that's roughly how
$2,000
much
makes it
buying power
literally
the average
impossible
Social
to save for
Security
an
check
emergency.
has lost every
This
single
proposal
month
raises it to
over the last 15
$10,000
years.
for an
Why?
individual and
Because those little
$20,000
COLA
for a couple.
increases just
For the
haven't kept
first
pace
time,
with
this
real
would allow
life.
people to build a
So
small safety
naturally,
net
Washington is
without being
talking about
punished
how to
for it.
fix this. And
The
there are
current
two big
SSI
ideas on the
rules
table
also
right now.
create what is just
On
an
one hand, you have the
impossible
Social
choice
Security
for so many
Expansion
people.
Act. This
It's
one's pretty
because of something
straightforward.
known
It
as the
proposes
marriage
adding an
penalty.
extra $200
Right now,
to
if
everyone's
two
benefit
people who
check
both
every
receive
single month.
SSI benefits
Then,
decide
on
to
the
get
other
married,
hand, there's the
their
American
total
Worker
combined
Rebate
benefit
Act.
gets cut by
This
nearly
is a totally different
25%.
approach. It's a
I mean,
one-time
can you
payment, a
imagine
$600
it forces
rebate check for
countless
working
couples to choose
Americans,
between
which would
getting
also
legally
include
married
seniors.
and their own
Okay,
financial
so
survival.
this is super important to
So
understand.
the SSI
These are just
Restoration
proposals.
Act has a very
They are not
clear,
laws.
very
I really
compassionate
want to stress
solution.
that. They
Just
could get
get
changed,
rid of
they
the
could get
marriage
stuck in
penalty
committee, they could
completely.
just disappear
Under
entirely.
this change,
It's good to
two
know they're
SSI
being talked about,
recipients who
but
get
please,
married
please
would
do
continue
not
to
build your
receive the
budget
exact
around
same
this
total
money.
benefit they
It
did
might
as
never
two
happen.
single people.
Okay,
It
so we've
basically
talked
says
about
that
the
people with
COLA,
disabilities
payment
have
dates, and these
every
new
right to build
proposals.
a life
And all of
together
that is
without
really
facing a
important
devastating
stuff.
financial
But
punishment
none of
for
it, and I mean
Okay,
none of
so
it,
we've looked
comes
at all
close
the
to the
individual
single
pieces of
biggest,
these
most
proposals,
expensive
but the
mistake that
real
people make
magic,
with their Social Security.
The real
And
power
what is that
happens
mistake?
when you start stacking
It's deciding
them all
when to
together.
start taking your
This
benefits.
is where you can
Now,
truly
look,
see
we
the
get it.
combined
For some
financial
people,
impact
claiming early
these
at
changes could
62
have on
isn't a
people's
choice,
everyday
it's a
lives.
necessity. But for
So
so
let's take
many
a real
others,
world
it's a
example.
decision they make
Imagine
because they're
someone
scared,
who's worked their
or they've heard
entire
bad
life
advice.
in low-wage
And
jobs.
that one
First,
single
they'd
decision,
get that flat
it can
$200
literally
boost that
cost you
everyone
tens
gets.
or
Then
even
on top
hundreds
of
of
that,
thousands
the
of
new
dollars
minimum
over your
benefit rule
lifetime.
could add another
Just
$300
think
to
about the math for a
$500 to their
second.
monthly check.
If you claim
You
at the
add it
very
all up,
first
and their
moment
monthly
you can,
retirement
age
income could
62,
increase by $500,
instead of waiting until you're
$600,
70,
maybe even
you are locking in a
$700.
benefit that's up to
For many people,
30%
that could
smaller.
nearly
And that's
double
not just
their
for a year or
income,
two.
transforming
That's
their
forever.
retirement from a
A
struggle to
smaller
one
check
of basic
today means a
security.
much smaller check
And if
when
you
you're
thought that was
85,
incredible,
90, or
wait
older,
until you
exactly
see the
when your
impact for a
expenses
married
might be at
couple
their
with
highest.
disabilities on SSI.
All right, so if that's the
It's
costliest
just
mistake,
revolutionary.
what's the smartest
The benefit
move?
increase
What's the
adds
secret?
$624
Well,
a
it's
month.
not some hidden
Then,
loophole.
eliminating
It's
that
about
full
having a
marriage
plan.
penalty
It's
restores
about
another
building a strategy that's right for
$471.
you.
That is
So
a
what does
total
that
monthly
strategy
gain
look
of
like?
$1,095.
It's a personal timeline,
Annually,
and it has
that's over
three key parts.
$13,000
First,
more a
you need
year.
to figure out your
a 77%
break-even
income
age.
boost that
That's
would
the point where
fundamentally
waiting to
change their
claim
quality of
actually
life.
puts you ahead
Of
financially
course,
in the
a
long
big
run.
question is probably
Second,
popping into
you
your head
absolutely
right
have
about
to look
now.
at spousal and
Expanding
survivor
benefits
benefits.
is great, but
For
how do we
couples,
make sure the
this can
system is
totally
strong
change
for
the game.
generations to come?
And third, you
Well,
have to
that's where the
factor in
third
all
proposal,
the other
the
pieces,
Social
like
Security
Medicare, to see what your
Act
actual
comes into
take-home
play.
pay will be.
It's all
You know,
about
when you
long-term
boil it all
solvency,
down, it
and
really
adds a
comes
few
back
more
to
really
one
key
big shift
improvements.
in how you think about all this.
This is it.
The most
This
common
is the
question
question
people
on
ask is,
everyone's
what's my
mind,
check
right?
going to be this
A
month?
major
But the
expansion
smarter
of
question,
benefits like
the
this
one that makes
needs
all
a
the difference,
serious plan
is
to pay
this.
for it,
How
not
do I
just for
make this
today,
benefit
but
last
for
for my
decades
entire
to come.
retirement, for the
And the
next 30,
Social
maybe
Security
even 40 years?
2100 Act
So that's the question
proposes
we
a
want to
very
leave you with.
specific way
Because a
to do
smart,
just
strategic
that.
decision you make
Okay,
today in your
here's how the funding
60s
would work, and
could
it's actually
literally be the
pretty
difference of
straightforward.
thousands and
Right now,
thousands of
there's a cap
dollars
on the
in your
income that's
pocket
subject to
when you're
Social
in your
Security
80s or
payroll
90s.
taxes. This
So are you
proposal
planning
would
for
keep
this month,
everything the
or
same
are you
for most
planning for
people,
the next
but
30
it would
years?
reapply the
Because
tax
that
on all
choice,
earnings above
well, that's the most
$400,000
powerful
a year.
Social Security
Let me
decision
be
you
super
will
clear
ever
about
make.
this. There is a
For
huge change
99.6%
happening
of
with
Americans,
Social
taxes
Security,
would not change
and
at
it's
all.
putting
This
billions
plan
of
only
dollars
affects the
back
top
where they belong,
0.4% of earners,
in the pockets
asking
of
them to
millions
contribute
of
more
Americans.
to secure the system
You know,
for
if you're
everyone.
one of the millions of
And get
retired
this, the
teachers,
2100 Act
firefighters,
also
police
includes a
officers,
tax
really
cut for
any
millions
public
of
servant
Social
in the
Security
U.S.,
beneficiaries.
this was made for
Right
you.
now, your benefits
So let's
can
break
be
down
taxed
exactly
if your
what
total
this
income
Social
is over
Security
just
Fairness $5,000. And more
This
importantly,
proposal
what
would
it means
double
for
that
you
threshold
and
to
these new back
$50,000 for
payments.
individuals.
Okay,
and
let's
more
get
than
right to
triple
it.
to
The number one
$100,000 for
question
married couples.
everyone has is,
For a whole
how
lot
much
of
money are we
middle-income
talking about here?
retirees, that means
Well,
an
the
immediate
Social
increase
Security
in their
Administration
take-home
has
pay.
confirmed it. The
So with
average
all these
one-time lump sum
transformative
payment
ideas on
is
the table,
a pretty hefty
what's the real chance of them becoming law?
$6,710.
It's really important to
for
understand
anyone
that
on a
what
fixed
we've been
income,
talking
a check
about
like
are
that can be
proposals.
an absolute
They're being
game
debated right
changer.
now in Congress.
And just
They
to give you a
aren't
sense of the
established
scale
law yet.
here, this isn't some small
the
niche
legislative process
adjustment.
is a long
We're talking
road.
about roughly
These bills have to get
3.2
through
million
committees in
people
both the House
who,
and the
for
Senate.
decades,
Then they have to get a vote on the floor.
have been
And
getting
a lot of the
smaller
time,
benefit
the House and
checks
Senate
than they
pass
should
different
have been.
versions, which then
After
have to be
all
worked
this
out
time,
before
the
one
system
final
is
bill can be sent to the president.
finally making
It's
it
a
right.
whole process.
The
and
amount
public
of
support
money
really
involved
does
here
play
is
a
just
crucial role.
staggering.
Get this.
And that
over
public support, it's incredibly strong.
billion
A recent poll
has
found that
already been paid
84%
out.
of all Americans,
And they're not even done
including
yet.
a remarkable
The SSA still has about
78% of
another
Republicans,
6
support
billion
increasing
to go.
Social Security benefits.
This is a massive
So while the
course
politicians in
correction.
Washington might be
So
debating,
you have to
it
ask,
seems the public
what
has
was the
pretty much made
problem
up
that
its
needed
mind.
to fix
This is not a
big?
partisan issue
Well,
for most
it all
people.
goes back to
It's just
a
a
couple
widely
of
shared
rules that have
belief
been on the
that
books
this
for
system
more
needs to
than
be
40
strengthened.
years.
And for
Ultimately,
many,
they
all these
created a
proposals,
really
all these
unfair
numbers and
penalty
tables,
for people
they
who chose a
force us
life
to ask
of
a
public
really
service.
fundamental question.
The whole
They
issue
move the conversation
really
beyond
boils
just
down
accounting
to
and ask us all to think about the
acronyms.
value of dignity,
WEP,
a security,
and
and a peace of
GPO.
mind
That's
for
the
millions of
windfall
our fellow
elimination
citizens.
provision and the
What is the
government
true
pension
value of a
offset?
secure retirement?
Now, they were
and of a
originally
society
meant
that
to stop
actually
something
honors the
called
promises it
double
makes to people
dipping.
who've worked
But
their
what
whole
they
lives.
actually did was
That's the
penalize
real question at the heart
millions
of
of
this
public
entire
servants.
debate.
Today, we are
Teachers,
jumping right into a
firefighters,
topic
cops,
that really hits
folks
home
who had
for
earned their
millions of
Social Security
Americans,
benefits,
but
Social
saw them
Security.
get slashed
We're going to go
just
way
because of
beyond
these
the
rules
headlines
to
The
look at some
difference this
specific
act
proposals
makes
on the
is
table
just
right now.
night and
Ideas
day.
that could
It's
seriously
so
change your
simple,
monthly
but it's
budget,
profound.
your peace of mind,
Before,
and
your
really
monthly
your
check
whole
was
future.
smaller than
We're
it
going to
should
break
have
down the
been.
numbers, the
Just
rules,
think about that.
and what it could
For
all mean for
years,
you.
maybe even decades.
So let's just start
every
with a
single
question.
month.
I want
But
you to take
now,
a second
after
and
the
really think
Fairness
about
Act,
this.
those
What if
reductions
your
are
monthly
gone,
check actually
wiped out.
covered all of your
Your
bills?
benefit
I
is
mean,
being
everything.
restored to
the
the
rent,
full
the lights,
amount that you
food, your
actually
prescriptions,
earned.
and you still had money
So,
left over at the
how
end of the
did
month.
this
How would that
40-year-old
feel?
problem
That
finally
feeling?
get solved?
Well, that's the promise
Well,
behind the
it took a
reforms we're going to
specific
explore
piece
today.
of legislation that,
for
believe
so
me,
many
has
people,
been
the
a
end of the
long,
month is
long
this
time in the making.
constant, stressful
The Social Security
tightrope walk,
Fairness Act.
figuring out what
That's
gets
the name
paid
you
and
need to
what
know.
has to wait.
It's the real
But the
game changer
proposals we're
here.
about to dive
It
into,
was signed into
they're
law
not just
early this
abstract
year,
ideas.
and it does
They
one
represent a
simple,
potential path
powerful
to
thing.
real,
It
tangible
repeals
relief
both
from
WEP
that day in,
and
day out
GPO.
financial pressure.
It just ends that 40-year
All right,
practice
so
of
let's
cutting
get down to the
benefits for this
nitty-gritty.
group of
We're going
retirees.
to look at the actual dollar
Period.
figures being
You know,
proposed
this
and
quote
translate
really
them
just says
into
it
what
all.
really matters.
This isn't
the
a
real
handout.
world
It's
impact
about
on your
restoring
wallet.
what is
This is where a
rightfully
policy
yours.
written on
That's
paper
the heart of
starts
it,
to feel
right?
like a meaningful
This is about
change in
fixing
your
a
actual
mistake.
life.
It's about giving
So
people the
the
benefits
most
they worked
straightforward
for
ideas
and
are the ones
earned.
that it's
Well,
about
put
dignity.
more money in your
It's
pocket
about
each month.
fairness. Let's start
All right, so we've
there
talked
and
about
look
the
at what could
why
be
and
a
the
pretty
how.
significant
Now let's
across
dig
the
into
board
the part
increase
you've been
for
waiting
Social Security
for. The
beneficiaries.
specifics of what
Okay,
this is
so
going
a
to
major
mean for
piece
your
of
bank
legislation
account.
that's being discussed
So this
is called the
fix
Social
really
Security
comes in two
Expansion
parts.
Act.
And the
First,
cornerstone of
there's
this
that
act is a
big
direct
one-time back
across-the-board
payment we
increase
talked
for
about.
every
That
single
average of
person receiving Social Security.
$6,700,
An extra
but maybe
$200
even
each
more
and
important
every
for your
month.
long-term
And this
planning
isn't some
is the
temporary
second
fix.
part.
We're talking
a
about a
permanent,
permanent
ongoing
boost to your
increase to your
base
monthly
benefit.
Social Security check.
You know,
On
an
average,
extra
we're talking
$200
about an
isn't just
extra
a
number on a statement.
$360.
In real life,
That's
every
a week's
single
worth of fresh,
month,
healthy groceries.
that adds up fast.
Instead of just relying on canned
So
goods.
you might
It's
be
being able to
wondering,
cover your
why
prescriptions
the
without having
big
to
lump
choose
sum
between your
payment?
health and some other
Well,
bill.
it's because
it's paying the
even though
electric
the
bill
law
in
was
full
signed
on
this
time
year,
without that
they
constant
made it
worry about a late
retroactive
fee
all
or
the
shut
way
off
back
notice.
to January
For a lot of
of
folks,
last
it's
year.
just the peace of
So
mind
the
knowing that if
SSA
your
is
glass
classes break, you can actually afford to get them fixed without a full-blown
all
crisis.
those months you were underpaid.
And when you zoom
since
out and
then.
look at it over a whole
And that's
year,
what makes out these
the impact
really
gets
substantial
even
back
bigger.
payments.
That $200 a month adds
let's
up to
get
an
into the
extra practical stuff.
$2,400.
What happens now?
That is a really significant
Let's walk
amount
through
of
the
money.
official timeline.
Think about what that could
and
do. Maybe
most
it's that essential
importantly,
dental work
what
you've been
you
putting
might
off for
need to
years,
do to get your money.
or a new set of tires
So
for the
here's
car,
the
so you
official
feel safe on
timeline
the
right
road.
from the Social
It creates
Security
a financial
Administration.
cushion that
The
right
repeal
now
officially
just
kicked
doesn't
in back in
exist for so
January
many
of
people.
2024.
Now,
Now,
beyond
the
just a
SSA
flat-out
starts
raise,
the massive
another
job of
really
adjusting
crucial
payments in
proposal
February of
tackles the
2025.
annual cost of living
By
adjustments,
April
or
2025,
COLA.
most people
Right now,
should
the
start
COLA
seeing
is
that
calculated
new
using a
higher
formula
monthly
that
amount
tracks
hit
what
their
younger
accounts.
working people buy.
Some of the more
The
complex
problem?
cases
Well,
will take a little
retirees and
longer,
seniors
but
spend
they're
their money
aiming to
very
have
differently.
every single
A
adjustment
much
done by
bigger chunk of
November
their income
2025.
goes to things like
So a
healthcare,
little
and
patience is
healthcare
needed
costs
here.
are rising
All
way
right,
faster
so
than general
what do
inflation.
you need to do right
So this
now?
proposal would
This
switch to
is
a new
really
formula,
important.
one
It
designed
breaks down
specifically
into
for
two
the elderly
groups.
that gives
First,
more
if
weight
you're
to the
already
things
getting
people are
Social
actually
Security
spending their
checks
money
that were
on.
being reduced
The
by
bottom
WEP
line
or
is,
GPO,
your benefits
you don't
wouldn't
have
just
to
get
do
a
a
one-time
thing.
boost.
Seriously,
They'd be better
the
protected
SSA
from
will
losing
handle
their
it
buying
all
power year after
automatically.
year. The only thing
Now
you should
let's switch
probably
gears
do
and
is
talk
log
about
into your account
supplemental
and make sure your
security
contact
income,
info
or
is up to
SSI.
date.
Because
But,
here the
and this is a
proposed
big
changes
but,
are even
if you're
more
one of those
dramatic.
people who never
The
even
SSI
bothered
Restoration
applying for
Act
benefits
is aiming to
because
lift
you
benefits
figured
from the
WEP or
current level
GPO
of
would just
around
wipe them out,
$943 a
you need
month
to file
all
an
the way up to the
application.
federal poverty
And you
line,
need to do
which
it
would be about
now.
$1,255.
And here's exactly
That's an
how you do
increase
that.
of $312
You can apply right
every single
online
month.
at
I mean, that is a genuine lifeline that could pull millions
ssa.gov/apply.
of people out of
To
poverty
check your account and
and give
verify
them
your
a shot
address,
at real
just go
stability.
to
On top of all these permanent monthly
ssa.gov/my-account.
increases,
Or if you
there's
prefer,
also
you can just
serious
call them.
discussion
The number is
happening about another round of
1-800-772-1213.
one-time stimulus payments.
The key
This
thing
idea
to
would
remember
provide
is
an
if you
immediate
need to
cash
apply,
injection
do
of
it soon.
$1,400
Because when you apply,
to
can
help people
actually
deal with
affect your
urgent
benefit
pressing
amount.
needs that have been
You know,
piling up.
when you step back
This
and
isn't
look at
for
the whole
long-term
picture,
planning.
this
This
is
is
about
about
so much
immediate
more
help
than just
right
the money.
now.
It's
A lump
it's a
sum payment like
profound
this is
recognition
all about
of a
tackling those
lifetime
big
of public
stressful
service.
problems that keep
It's
you
the
up at
system
night.
finally
It could
saying,
mean
we got
finally
it
getting
wrong,
caught up on
and
past
making
due
sure that
bills,
after
getting
all
that dental
that
work you've been putting
you
off for
get the
years,
financial
or paying
security
down
that
a
you were
high-interest credit card.
always
And that last one
rightfully
is
owed.
huge.
So
Because
fixing
paying
this
off that
40-year-old
kind of debt
problem
doesn't just solve an immediate problem, it frees up more of your cash every single
and it really
month
gets you
going
thinking,
forward.
doesn't it?
It's
So
a
we'll
chance
leave
to
you with
hit
this
the
question to
reset
chew
button.
on.
Now that
All right,
this
so
is
putting
finally
more cash
fixed,
in people's
what
pockets
other
is
parts of
absolutely
Social
critical.
Security do you
But
think
it's
need a
really only
serious
half of the
update
puzzle.
to make them
The
fair
other
for the
half is
21st
about
century?
fixing these
We're heading
outdated
into
and frankly
Section 3,
unfair rules
Washington's
that can trap
proposed
people in
boosts.
poverty and
Yeah,
limit their
there
most
are
basic
actual
life
proposals in
choices.
Congress right now
So
that
let's
could
look
mean
at how these
hundreds more
proposals want to
dollars
fix
for
the
you.
system itself.
So what's with this
quote,
number?
it just says it all, doesn't it?
$370. It gets right
Well,
to the
it's
heart
not
of
just
one of the
pulled out
most
of thin air.
punishing rules
According
in
to
the
some
current
recent
SSI
reports,
system. That's
what's
how
known
much
as
buying power the
marriage
average
penalty.
retiree has lost.
Right now,
not
the
over a
system
year.
literally
Every
penalizes two
single
people on
month.
SSI
All because
financially
the
if
official
they decide
cost
to
of
get
living
married.
adjustments just
These
haven't
new
kept up with
reforms
real
are built
world
on a
inflation
very
for
simple
years.
principle.
So to
Your
try and
benefits
fix this,
shouldn't
there are
force
a
you to
couple
choose
of
between
big
financial
ideas on the
security
table.
and the person
First,
you
you've
love.
got the Social Security
Just take a
Expansion
look at
Act.
these numbers.
This one would give
It's
beneficiaries
kind of
an
shocking
extra
when you see it laid out like
$200
this.
every single
Right
month,
now,
ongoing.
two individuals on
Then
SSI
there's a different
get a combined
approach, the American Worker Rebate Act,
$1,186,
which proposes a
but if they get
one-time
married,
check for
their benefit gets
$600
slashed to
kind of like those stimulus checks we saw a few years back.
They
Now,
lose almost
and this is a
$500
really
a month
big but.
just for
We
getting
have to
married.
be
The proposal
realistic.
gets rid of that
As the
penalty
saying goes,
completely.
it's a bill,
And when you combine
not a
that
law.
with the benefit increase
These
we just
ideas
talked
are
about,
just that.
a married couple would bring
Ideas.
in over
They could get changed,
$1,000
they
more
could
per
stall,
month than they do
could
today.
disappear
This is a
completely.
complete game
So my
changer
advice,
that restores
don't
dignity
start
to
spending
relationships.
that money in your head.
Here's
But
another rule that's just
do pay attention.
incredibly out of date.
Knowing these proposals
Since
exist means you can
1984.
keep an eye on
That's
them.
right.
Okay, let's get to our final
1984,
section. And
SSI
honestly, this
recipients
is
have
the
not
most
been allowed
important
to
one.
have more than
Everything we've talked
$2,000
about
in
so far
assets
is
without
COLA,
losing
the
their
calendar,
benefits.
even those proposed
Just to put that in
boosts,
perspective,
it all takes a
$2,000
backseat
back
to
then
the
would be
single
worth
biggest
over
financial decision
$6,000
that is
today.
completely in
The rule
your
is stuck
hands.
in the past.
And
The
that
proposal
is your
would raise this
claiming
limit to a
strategy.
much more
It boils down
realistic
to one question.
$10,000.
When do you
This
start
means you
taking
could
your Social
finally have a
Security
real
benefits?
emergency
It sounds
fund.
simple, but
If
it
the
has
car breaks
a
down, you don't have to go
massive
into
permanent
debt.
impact
You can have
on your
some money
monthly
set
check
aside.
for the rest
It provides
of
a
your
level
life.
of security that
So
is
many people
basically
get this wrong,
impossible right
usually
now.
because they're scared the system will
So
run
we've
out of
looked
money,
at the direct
and that
payments
mistake
and
can
we've
literally
looked at the
cost
rule
them
changes.
tens, even hundreds
Now
of
let's try to put
thousands
it
of
all
dollars.
together.
You want to see how big
What
the
would daily
impact
life
is?
actually
Just
feel
look at this
like
number.
if all of this
If you
became
claim your
reality?
benefits at the earliest
Because
possible
this is about
age,
more than just
62,
numbers on a page.
instead
It's about
of
a
waiting
total
until your
shift in
full
your
retirement
day-to-day
age,
existence.
you could be locking in a
So picture your
permanent pay
morning.
cut of up to
Instead of
30%.
waking up with that
And when I say
familiar knot
permanent,
of
I mean
anxiety
for
in your
life.
stomach about
See, a real
which bill
strategy
you can
isn't
afford
just
to
about
pay,
circling a
you
date
wake
on the
up with a sense
calendar.
of calm.
It's about knowing all
can
the
take your
pieces
medicine
of
on
your
time
own
without worrying
puzzle.
about the cost
You
of
need
the
to know your
refill.
break-even age.
You can have a
the
healthy
point where
breakfast
waiting to
because
claim
you actually
actually
have the
puts
money to
more
buy
money in your
fresh
pocket
groceries.
long term.
The
You got to
entire
understand
tone
how
of your day
spousal
changes
and
before you
survivor
even
benefits
had your
work.
first
And
cup
you
of coffee. absolutely have to factor in things like Medicare premiums and any other income you might have. It all works together. Store becomes about choosing nutritious food, not just what's cheapest.
It's so
You
easy
have the
to get
freedom
caught
to
up
say
in
yes when
how
a
much
friend
can I
asks you
get
to go
this
grab a
month?
cup of coffee.
But the smart play
You can
is
make
to
a doctor's
ask,
appointment
how
without
can I
dreading the
make this
copay.
benefit last?
All
and
these little
provide real
freedoms add up
security
to a
for the
life
next
that feels
20,
less
30,
isolated and more
maybe even
connected,
40 years.
healthier, and just
That's the
fuller.
game changer.
And
Moving
at
from
night,
just monthly
that
income
constant
to true
grinding
long-term
worry that
financial
keeps
security.
so many people
So
awake
I'll just
can
leave you
finally
with this
start to
one
fade.
question to think
Just
about.
knowing you have a
Is
small
your claiming
savings
date
account for
based
an
on a
emergency,
real strategy,
knowing your
or
income
is it based
on an
on an
assumption,
assumption,
will
or
actually
maybe
keep
even
up with rising
fear?
costs?
Because the
That
most
financial
powerful
security
decision you
is
can make
directly
isn't
tied to
just
better
choosing
physical and
when to
mental
file,
health,
but
it means you
understanding
can actually
why.
rest.
A
And
smart
that's
choice
absolutely
now,
essential
in your
for your
60s,
well-being.
can translate into
And this quote
thousands
really
and
sums up the
thousands of
entire
extra
goal
dollars
here.
later in life
For
when you
far
are
too
absolutely
long,
going
the
to need it
system
the
has
most.
forced
Today, we
millions
are
of
going to
people
tackle
into
a
state
really
of just
confusing
barely
Social
surviving,
Security topic
where
that's,
every single
well,
day
it's
is a
all over
struggle
the
just
internet.
to get by.
It's this so-called
These reforms are
lump sum
all about
payment.
making a
So
crucial
what is
shift
it? And more
from
importantly,
just
could
surviving
you
to
be owed one?
actually living.
Let's find out.
It's about
So
having the
you've
resources
probably
and the
seen the
peace of mind
headlines,
to enjoy your
maybe heard the
retirement,
chatter
your
online about
relationships,
this
and your
big
life with the
special
dignity
payment
that's
that's
supposed
supposed
to
to
be
be coming
coming
from the
deserve.
Social Security Administration.
Now, it is really important to remember
it sounds
that
pretty
this
exciting,
more
right?
secure future
But
we're
what is
talking
it
about
really?
isn't
Is it
a
something you can
guarantee
actually
just yet.
expect to see pop up
All
in your
the
bank
ideas
account?
we've discussed
We've
are
seen this
inside
exact
legislative
question
proposals
everywhere,
that
you
are
know?
being debated
Especially
right
from
now.
folks
They
receiving
need
political
SSDI
will
and SSI.
and,
just as
everyone is
importantly,
asking,
public support
hey, is this
to
some
actually get
new
signed
bonus
into
that I
law.
can qualify for?
So
And
let's
that's a
just
great
quickly
question,
run through
but
the
the thing
key
is,
proposals
the
we
answer
touched
isn't
on.
a simple
You've
yes
got
or
the
no.
Social Security
So,
Expansion
let's break
Act,
down what's
which is
really
where that
going
big
on here.
$200
Okay, let's
monthly
just get
increase
one
comes
thing
from.
straight
There's the
right away.
SSI
The
Restoration
payment
Act,
that's
which
causing
would raise
all
those
this buzz
benefits
is
and
not
fix the marriage
for everyone.
penalty and asset
It is
limits.
not some kind
You
of
also have
universal
the
benefit
Social
that's going
Security
out to
2100
every single
Act,
person
which
on Social
includes
Security.
benefit improvements
It actually
and tax
only
relief.
applies to a
And
very
then separate
specific
from
group
all
of
that
people
is
in
the
a
ongoing
very
talk about
specific
another
situation.
one-time stimulus
This
payment
whole
for
rumor
immediate
seems
help.
to have started with a
So for
particular
anyone who
strategy
believes
for
in these
retirement
changes,
beneficiaries.
the path forward
But here's the
really
reality
involves
of it.
taking
The vast
action.
majority of people,
That means
we're talking
things
about
like contacting your
76%,
elected
they
representatives
file for
to
their
let them know
benefits
where you stand.
before they even
Sharing
hit their
your
full
own
retirement
personal
age.
story can be
The strategy that started all this talk,
It puts a
well,
human
it
face on
only
all
even
these
becomes a
numbers.
possibility for
And
a
of
small
course,
piece of
voting
that
for
much
candidates
smaller
who
group who
support these
decide
issues
to
and
wait.
joining advocacy
So
groups
what
adds your
is
voice
a
to a
lump
growing
sum in
chorus
the
that's
Social
demanding
Security world
change.
anyway?
Well,
So,
it's not a
we're going
bonus.
to end
It's
right
almost
where we
always
began,
what's called
with a
retroactive
question
pay,
for you to
or,
think about.
back pay.
After hearing
Just think of
all
it like
these
this.
details,
It's the money that
numbers,
covers the gap
potential
of time
changes,
between when you first
what would this
qualified
level
for
of
benefits
financial
and
security
when that
truly
first check
mean for
finally
you,
arrived in the
for your
mail.
family,
And this is
for your
really,
future?
really important to
What
understand.
doors would it
If
open?
you've been getting your
What
benefits for
worries would it
years,
finally
a lump sum
close?
payment is not just
That
going to
vision,
suddenly show up in
that's
your
what this
account.
entire
That's just not how
conversation
this
is
works.
really about.
These kinds of
And it's
payments
a
are
future that
almost
a lot of
always
people
tied to
believe
a
is worth
new
fighting for.
application for
Today,
benefits.
we're going to get into a topic
It
that is on a
really
lot
just
of
comes
people's
down to
minds,
this.
the
Your
future
monthly
of
benefit,
Social
that's
Security.
the ongoing
There are
regular
some major
predictable
proposals
payment
being
you count on
discussed
every
right
month.
now that can mean a
A lump
huge
sum payment
increase
is
in
totally
benefits.
different. It's a
So we're going to
one-time
break
thing,
down
it's
exactly what these
retroactive,
changes could
and it's
mean
almost
for your
always for new
wallet.
applicants who had to wait a
This
while
one
before
sentence
their claim
really
got
gets to the
approved.
heart of
All
what's
right, now
driving
here's
these
where
reforms.
things get kind of
It's such
interesting.
a powerful
Because the
idea.
rules for these lump
It
sums
frames
are
this whole
completely different
conversation
depending
not
on
just
the
as
type of
policy
benefit you're
talk,
getting.
but about the
So
kind of
let's look at the
society
three
we
main
actually
scenarios
want
here.
to live in.
Retirement,
One where a
SSDI,
lifetime
and
of hard
SSI.
work is
Okay,
rewarded with
so
security, not
first up,
constant
let's
worry.
talk about the
And
retirement
that
beneficiaries.
is the
This
billion-dollar
is the group
question,
whose specific
isn't it?
situation is
It's
what
the one we're
kicked
here to
off
answer
all of
today.
the recent
I
online
mean,
buzz
it's
we've
one
been
thing to talk
seeing.
about big
Here's how it
ideas
works
like
for them.
dignity
So
and security,
let's say someone decides
but it's
to
a
wait
whole
to
other
claim their
thing to see
retirement
what that means in
benefits,
actual
delaying
dollars and
past their
cents.
full retirement
How does this
age.
vision translate
For
into
every
cold,
single month they
hard
wait, their
cash for
future
you or
monthly
the people
payment
you
gets
care
a little
about?
bit bigger.
Okay,
So then,
so
when they
here's our
finally
game
decide
plan.
to file,
We'll
Social
start with that
Security
big
might offer them
vision,
a choice.
then we'll break down the
They can
three
say,
key
look, you
legislative
can take that
proposals that are
higher
making
monthly
all this
benefit you
happen.
earned.
After
Or
that, we're
you
getting
can
into
take
the
a
real
slightly
numbers,
lower one
looking
plus
at
a
the
lump
financial
sum
impact
payment
on
for up to
3
6
different
months
groups:
of back
the average
payments.
retiree,
And you
the
gotta
person who's worked
remember that
low-wage
number,
jobs their whole
6
life,
months.
and SSI
In
recipients.
this very
And then
specific
we'll wrap it
retirement
all up by
scenario,
looking at the big
that is
picture.
the absolute
So
maximum
let's be
amount of
clear.
back pay
Our
Social
focus
Security is
today
going to
is
offer.
100%
It's a trade-off,
on the
you see.
numbers.
You
We're
get a
going to
chunk
move
of cash
past
now,
all the
but you
political
give up
back
that
and forth
slightly
and
higher
just give you a
permanent
clear
benefit you would have
financial
earned for
picture of
waiting
what
those
these
extra
potential
months.
reforms
So
could
what about
mean for
everybody who is
millions of
asking about
Americans.
SSI and SSD?
Okay, so to really understand these
version of this
potential
for you?
financial shifts,
Well, the
we
answer
first have to look
is
at the three
yes,
main legislative
but
acts that are the
it works
engines
very,
behind all this.
very differently.
Each one
For
tackles a
people
different
on
part of the
SSDI
system,
and
but when you put
SSI,
them
a
together,
lump
well,
sum
they
is
create a
almost
pretty
always
comprehensive
back
overhaul.
pay that you get right at
All
the
right,
very
first
beginning of
up
your
is
claim.
the Social
It's
Security
designed to
Expansion
cover that
Act.
often very
The main
long
feature here is
waiting
super
period
simple
between
and
when you
super
first
powerful.
became disabled,
A
when you
direct,
applied for
across-the-board
benefits, and when
increase
you
of
finally got
$200 a
approved.
month for
And
every
for
single
SSDI,
beneficiary.
the calculation
That's
also
an
has
extra
to factor in a
$2,400
mandatory
a year.
5-month waiting
For
period.
the average person
So
on
again,
Social Security,
this isn't
that's
some
like getting an
surprise bonus.
11%
It's the
raise
money
overnight.
you were owed from the whole
A
application
huge deal for
process.
anyone on
Okay,
a fixed
so
So after looking at all
Next, we
these
have the
details, let's
SSI
circle all the way
Restoration
back to that
Act.
first
Now,
question.
this one is laser
Based on
focused
your
on the
own
8 million
situation,
Americans, the
are you a
elderly,
new applicant
blind, and
or a
disabled,
long-term
who rely on
beneficiary?
supplemental
Are you on
security income.
retirement, SSDI,
Right now, the
or
maximum
SSI?
federal benefit
Does
actually
this
leaves people
so-called
living
special
below the
payment
poverty line.
actually apply to
This
you?
act would
Look,
change
here's
that,
the bottom line.
period.
Whether
It
we're
would
talking
raise
about
benefits to
retirement,
100%
SSDI,
of
or
the federal
SSI,
poverty level.
these lump
And the
sums
third
are
piece
just
of this
back
puzzle
payments.
is the Social
They're
Security
not bonuses.
2100 Act.
And they almost
This one kind of
always
takes the
happen
long
at the
view.
very
It has a
beginning
bunch of
a claim,
improvements, but for
not
our purposes,
years
there are
down
two
the
key
road.
things to know.
And
It
probably
creates a
most
new, much
importantly,
stronger minimum
the rules
benefit for
are
folks who've
different
worked
for
in
every
low-wage
single
jobs their
one
whole
of these
lives,
programs.
and it provides some
With so
significant
much
tax relief for
misinformation
beneficiaries.
floating around out there,
Okay,
knowing
now this is
the
where it gets
actual
really
facts
interesting,
is your
because
single
these
best
proposals
financial
aren't
tool.
mutually
The
exclusive.
real takeaway
Their
here
effects can
isn't about
actually
some
be
surprise
combined.
check.
So
It's
let's
about
start by looking at
understanding
what
the
this
system that
combination
you
of
rely on.
reforms could mean for an
So
average retiree.
here's a thought.
We're talking
What's
about a
one
real
thing you can do
transformation in their
this week
financial
to
reality.
better understand your
So the
own
average
benefits?
Social Security
Today,
benefit
we're
today
jumping
is
into a
hovering
really
around
interesting idea that could totally
$1,838
change
a month.
how we look at
Right off the
financial
bat,
support,
the Expansion
especially
Act
when times
adds
get
a
tough.
flat
It's all about
$200.
asking,
Is
On top
there
of
a
that,
smarter way to
proposed
help
change
people
to how
out?
cost of
I
living
mean, you
adjustments
feel
are
it,
calculated
I feel it,
could add
we
another,
all
say,
feel it,
$10
right?
to $15.
The price of
And
just
then
about
the tax
everything
relief
seems
from
to
the
be going up
2100
and
Act
up.
could put
It puts
another
a
$50
real
to
squeeze on
$75
their
back
wallet.
in their pocket.
And that leads us
You
to
add it
a
all up,
huge
and
question.
the average
With
retiree could
costs
see their monthly
climbing like
income
this,
jump by
is there
about
a better,
$300.
more intelligent way to
And
provide
listen,
some relief?
this is not
And
a
that
small
right there
change. Is the heart
that
of the problem.
$300 a month
We've all
adds
seen
up to
prices jump,
$3,600
but for a lot
over
of
the course
people,
of a year.
especially
For
folks on
someone
Social
living on
Security
about
or other fixed
$22,000
incomes,
a year,
the money
that
coming
is a
in
16%
just isn't keeping
increase
up with
in
the
their
money
total
going out.
income.
So
That
we're
is
going to look at one
genuinely
idea that's
transformative.
designed to fix that exact
So
problem.
what does an extra
what is this
$3,600
new
a
idea
year all
actually
about?
buy you?
Well, it buys you peace of
because
mind.
of all the
It means
economic
you no
challenges
longer
we've
have to
seen,
choose
experts
between
are talking
refilling
about
your
a pretty major
prescriptions and
shift
buying
in
a
how
full
we
cart of
handle this
groceries.
stuff.
It
It's
means
a
when the
much
car
more
gets a flat
targeted
tire, it
approach,
doesn't
and it's
automatically
really
become a
different from what
financial
we've done in the
crisis that
past.
sends you into
The
debt.
big number
It's
at
the
the center
difference
of this
between
whole
just getting
proposal
by
is
and having the breathing room to
$2,000.
maybe
And no,
save a
not
little,
just as
go
a
visit
one-off
the
payment,
grandkids,
but
or
as a
just enjoy
regular
a hobby.
monthly check.
It's about
This is the
restoring
number
dignity.
that supporters think could offer
So,
some real,
if the impact on
consistent
the
help.
average retiree is significant, for
how would
people
this
who have
thing
spent a
actually play out?
lifetime in
Well,
physically
the
demanding
idea is for these
low-wage
ongoing
jobs,
monthly
well,
checks, but
it's nothing
and
short
this is
of
the key
revolutionary.
difference. They wouldn't
These
go
are
to
the
everybody.
folks who have so
They'd
often
be aimed
fallen through the
specifically
cracks
at
of the
low
system
and fixed
as it
income
is.
households.
It's
The
a
whole goal
harsh
is to give
reality
them
that
immediate
right now
spending power
someone
to
can
help them
work
cover
for
that
30
gap that
years in a
inflation is
low-wage
created.
job
But
and still
why do it
retire
this
into
way?
poverty.
Why only
These
target certain
proposals
people?
would completely
Well, it all
flip that
boils
script.
down to the
They'd get
economics
that same
of how different
$200
people
bump
spend
from
their
the
money.
Expansion
And
Act,
honestly,
but then
this is
the
where the
new
whole
minimum
proposal
benefit
gets
from
really
the 2100
fascinating.
Act
The key
could add another
concept has this
$300
really
to
fancy
$500
sounding
per
name,
month.
the marginal
With tax
propensity
relief
to
on top,
consume,
we're
or
talking
MPC.
a total
But
monthly
don't let the name
increase of
fool you.
between
It's actually super
$530
simple.
and
All it means is,
$750.
when you get an extra
For a lot of
dollar,
these folks,
how much of
that
it do
could
you
nearly
spend,
double
and
their
how
retirement
fast do you
income.
spend it?
This one idea is
Seriously,
crucial to
let's just
understanding
pause
the
on that
entire
number
plan.
for a second.
And when you look at the
An
studies on
annual
this,
increase
it's pretty
of up to
wild.
$9,000.
When a lower-income household gets
This isn't just about a little financial relief.
They spend about
This is a
80%
fundamental
of it.
shift.
That's $1,600.
It's the difference between
in the
retiring
first
into
10
poverty
days.
and
The
retiring
rest
with a
of it,
basic level of
gone
security
within the
and
next
dignity
month.
that actually
That
honors a
super fast
lifetime
spending
of work.
is exactly what
This
economists
changes
mean
everything.
when they say
It means
someone
having
has a
enough
high
money for healthy food
MPC.
and to actually
And
see
this
a
just
doctor when
lays
you need
out the
to.
big
It
difference.
means having a small
right?
cushion for
People with a
emergencies
high MPC,
instead of being one
who are
unexpected
usually on
bill
lower
away from
incomes,
total disaster.
spend new
For
money
millions
almost
of people,
immediately,
home health
often
aides,
because they have
farm
to,
workers,
for
childcare
necessities.
providers. This
On the
provides a
flip
level of
side,
security in
folks
their
with
later
higher
years that was
incomes,
probably
the low
unimaginable
MPC
before.
group, are way
Now
more
let's turn
likely
to
to
the
save
8
it,
million
invest
Americans
it, or
on
pay off
supplemental
debt.
security
That
income.
money doesn't get
We're
pumped
talking about
back
some of
into
our
the
nation's
economy
most
nearly as
vulnerable
fast,
citizens,
if it
the
even
elderly,
does at all.
the blind,
So this
and the
brings us to a
disabled.
really
And for
important
this group,
comparison.
these proposed
To
changes
really get
would be
why this
absolutely
new targeted
life-altering.
idea is even on the table,
The current
we've
max
got to
federal
look back at
SSI
those
benefit
big
is
stimulus checks that went out
$943
in
a month,
2020
which,
and
yes,
2021
is below the poverty
and kind of learn from
The
what
SSI
happened.
Restoration Act
The difference
would boost
between
that
these
to
two plans is just night and
$1,255.
day.
That's an
The old
immediate
stimulus went to about
$312
85%
extra
of
every
everyone.
single
And look,
month.
the intention
That's a
was good,
33%
but
raise
the
that
absolutely
lifts people
massive
out of
cost
poverty
was a big
in one
factor in
single
the
move.
inflation we're all dealing
Over
with
a
now.
year, that's
This
an
new
increase of more than
proposal is meant to be the exact opposite.
$3,700.
Surgically
Again, this isn't
targeted,
just a number
way
on a
less
spreadsheet.
expensive,
It
and
represents
designed
the
to give a
very real,
focused boost to
tangible
the
difference
economy
between living in
without
poverty
causing
and living
prices
with
to
a
spiral.
baseline of dignity.
Okay, let's
free from
really
that
zero in on
constant
that cost
grinding
difference,
anxiety
because the
of
numbers
never
here tell
having
you
enough.
everything you need to know
But the
about
changes
why
here
this
go
new
even
strategy
deeper
is
than
being
the monthly
considered.
check.
Those
Those
this one is
widespread
just
stimulus
incredible.
checks from a
The
few
SSI
years
Restoration
back,
Act
they
also
cost around
fixes one of the system's most
$850
outdated
billion.
punishing rules.
Just
the
think about
asset
that
limit.
number for a second.
For 40 years,
It's a
since
staggering amount of
1984,
money to
recipients
push into
couldn't
the
have more than
economy all at once.
$2,000 in savings.
Now compare that
This
to the
proposal
estimate
raises
for
that
this
limit
new
5 times
targeted
over
idea,
to
giving
$10,000,
3 monthly
finally
checks
allowing
of
millions to build a
$2,000
small
to
emergency
about
fund
50 million
without the fear of
people
losing their
would cost
benefits.
around $100 And it billion. also gets That's rid of less than another an eighth major, of the frankly, cost for what's
what's
remain
argued to be a more
the marriage
direct and
penalty.
sustained
As
impact.
it stands now,
So what
if
does that
two
really
people
mean in
on
practice?
SSI get married,
It means for a
their
tiny
combined
fraction of
benefits
the
get cut
cost,
by almost 25%.
this plan could give more
It forces
consistent,
this
ongoing
impossible
help
choice between
directly
having
to
a
the people who
relationship
need it,
and financial survival.
all while trying to
This
avoid that
proposal
big
ends that.
inflationary wave
A married
that ends
couple's
up hurting
benefit would go
everybody
from
in the
that
long run.
penalized
And all of this
$1,415
leads to what a lot of the
month to a
experts
full
behind this idea are calling the
$2,510.
win-win
That is
argument.
a 77%
It's a vision for a more
income
focused, more
increase. It's
efficient,
about affirming
and
the right
you
to
could
build
argue
life
a
with someone
fair
you
way
love
to
without
handle
being
economic
punished
relief
for it.
in the future.
So the argument really is that it's just a smarter way to do things. You're getting money straight to the people who will actually spend it, which gives you a much better bang for your buck in terms of stimulating the economy. And by learning from the past, the goal is to be more cost-effective and a lot fairer, especially to those whose incomes have fallen behind.
And in the end, it really does come back to this simple quote.
The big story
The
here.
whole point
This
of a
whole
stimulus
suite of
check
reforms
is for
is
people to
designed to
spend it.
move millions of people That's why
from
it's
a
called
state
a
of
stimulus,
just surviving
giving
to a
it to
state
people
of
who are just going to
stability.
park it in a
It's about
savings account
replacing
doesn't
anxiety
really
with
achieve that
confidence
goal.
and
Giving it
desperation
to the folks
with
who'll
dignity.
spend it right away.
It's about giving people the
Absolutely
financial
does.
breathing room
Which, of
to not
course,
just
leaves
get
us with
through
that
the
one
day,
big
but to
question.
actually plan
When you look
for
at the
tomorrow,
lessons from
for
the
next
past,
year,
and you
for the
follow
rest
the
of their
economic
lives.
logic we've just
So
walked
we
through,
end with this
could this kind
question.
of targeted
Because
approach
these
be the
proposals,
future
with
of
all
financial
their
relief?
numbers and details,
It's definitely a
they really
powerful idea
represent
to
a
think
choice
about.
about
Today
what
we're
we
diving
value
into
as
some
society.
really big
They
proposals
present a very
that
clear
could change
vision
the
of a
monthly
future
benefits
with more
for
security,
millions of
more
people
dignity
who
for
receive
millions.
supplemental security
And the question
income,
that leaves
or
for all of us
SSI.
is,
All
what
right,
kind of future will we
let's
choose to
start
build?
with this number.
Today, we are
For
jumping right
2025,
into the future
the
of Social
absolute
Security.
maximum
There's a
federal
huge
SSI
package of
benefit
reforms
for a
being
single
discussed that
person
could
is
literally transform the financial lives of
$967 a
millions
month.
of Americans.
That's the
So,
ceiling.
we're going to
The
focus on
most
the one
anyone can
question
get
that
from the
really
program
matters.
each month.
What could these
And that
changes
brings us to the
actually
big
mean for
question,
your bank
right?
account? Let's
With
get
the
into
cost
it.
of everything
You
these
know,
days,
this quote right here,
rent,
it really gets to the
food,
heart
you
of what
name it.
all of this is about.
A lot of people
This
are
isn't just
asking
about
if that
tweaking
amount is
some
really
numbers in a
enough to
government
get by.
program. It's
So
about
to
a
really
bigger
get what these
vision
proposals
about
are all
rethinking
about,
what
we
security
first have
and
to
quality of
understand
life
the
should look
problem
like
they're
for our
trying to fix.
seniors
And it
and
really
our
all
most
comes down
vulnerable
to a
citizens.
growing financial
It really
gap
sets the
between
stage for
SSI
everything we're
benefits
about to cover.
and the official poverty
Okay,
level.
so a big vision
You
is
know,
great,
it's
but let's
interesting.
get real.
When this
How does that
program was
lofty goal
created
actually
more than
translate
50
into
years
dollars
ago,
and
the
cents?
whole point
That's what
was
we're here
to act
do.
as a
We're going
safety
to break
net,
down the
to
exact
keep people
proposals to
right
give you
at the
a
federal
super
poverty
clear
line.
financial picture
But
of
over
what
the
these increases
decades,
could
well,
look like.
it's fallen
month by
behind.
month and year
And
by
this
year.
chart just lays
All
it
right,
all out,
here's
doesn't
our
it?
roadmap for today.
On one side,
We'll
you've got the
start with
max
that
SSI
big
benefit
vision,
at
then we'll break down the
967.
three key
On
proposals
the
that
other,
make it
the
happen.
2025
After that,
federal
we'll get into
poverty
the
line,
real numbers,
which is
looking at the financial impact on average
$1,304.
retirees,
You can
low-wage
literally see the
workers, and
gap
SSI
right there.
recipients.
And that difference
finally,
comes
we'll
out
zoom
to
out and look at the bigger picture.
$337.
So for this
every
entire
single
explainer,
month.
I want to
That's
be
the shortfall.
crystal clear.
And that number
we
is at
are
the
going to focus
absolute
entirely
heart of this
on the
whole
proposed
debate.
increases
You can
in benefits.
really feel the
Now, I
urgency
know there
in
are
this
always
quote from our
complex
source
debates about
material.
how to pay for
I mean,
things,
that's pretty
but for
powerful
right now,
language.
our goal
and
is
it
to
just
show you
shows
the
how
numbers,
strongly
to
some
clarify
people
what the
feel that the
potential
system
upside
needs
could
to be
look like in your
modernized to
pocket.
close that
We
gap.
want you to see how this could
Okay,
be
so
a
we've
really
seen the problem.
significant
Now,
financial
what are
shift
the
for
proposed
millions.
solutions? Well,
To
the
really
first big one
understand
is a
the
piece of
potential
legislation
impact,
aimed
you first have
squarely
to
at
know
closing
where
that
it's all
financial
coming
gap
from.
we just looked
There
at.
are basically
It's
three
called
key
the
bills at the
SSI
center of
Restoration
this whole
Act.
effort.
You can
So let's
basically
quickly
think
break
of it as
down
a
what
big
each one
package
is
of
trying to
updates
accomplish.
trying to modernize
First
parts
up,
of the
we've got the
program
Social
that,
Security
frankly,
Expansion
haven't been
Act.
touched in decades.
Think of this as the
The
foundation.
single
Its biggest, most powerful
most
feature is
significant
super
change
simple.
in this
A
act
$200
would be
a
to raise
month
the maximum
across the
monthly
board
benefit to
increase
match
for
the
every
federal
single
poverty line.
beneficiary.
The goal
That's
is
an
to
extra
get the program
$2,400
back to
a
doing
year.
what it was
For an
originally
average
intended
person,
to do.
that's like getting
So
an
remember that
11% raise overnight.
$337
It's a
gap?
foundational lift
This would
for
close it.
absolutely
For
everyone.
someone getting the
Next
maximum
is the
benefit,
SSI
this would mean a
Restoration Act.
direct
Now, this
increase
one
of
is laser-focused on the
$337 a
8
month,
million
bringing their
elderly,
total from
blind, and disabled Americans
967
who
up to
rely on
that poverty
supplemental
line
security
figure
income.
of $1,304.
Right now, the maximum
this
benefit
is
actually leaves people
absolutely
living
critical
below
to
the poverty
understand.
line. So this act
is
aims
a
to fix
proposal.
that straight
It's
up
being
by
discussed,
raising the
but it has
benefit
not
to
been passed by
100% of the
Congress. It
federal
is
poverty
not
level.
current law.
It's about providing
Okay,
immediate,
so the next big
substantial
proposal
relief.
tackles another part of
And
the
the third
program
piece
that
of the
critics
puzzle
say
is the
is
Social
seriously
Security
out of date.
2100 Act.
The super strict
This is a
limits
really
on how
broad
much money a
proposal, but
person
we're
can
going to
have
zero
in
in on its
savings.
two major
These limits
benefit
on
boosts.
assets,
First,
they haven't been
some pretty
updated for
significant
inflation
tax relief for
in
beneficiaries.
decades.
And
This
second,
makes it
a
almost
much
impossible for
stronger
people to
minimum
save up
benefit
even a
for
small
people who spent
emergency
their
fund
entire
for,
lives working
a
in
car
low-wage
repair
jobs.
or an unexpected bill.
Okay,
And the
this is where it
proposed
gets
change here
really
is
interesting.
huge. The
See,
asset
these
limit for a single
proposals aren't
person
designed
would
to
jump
exist
from the
in a
current
vacuum.
$2,000
They're meant to stack on
all the
top
way
of each
up
other.
to $10,000.
So let's start our
And
financial
for married
breakdown by
couples,
looking at what
the
happens when you
increase is
combine
just
their
as
effects for
dramatic.
the average
It
retiree
would go
in
from that
that
America today.
long-standing $3,000
Let's
limit
just walk through this
to a
table together.
proposed $20,000.
So an average retiree today
To put that in
gets about
perspective, for an individual,
$1,838 a month.
that's a
Okay.
500%
Under these
increase in
reforms,
how much
boom,
they'd be allowed
the
to
Social
save
Security Expansion
without being
Act
penalized
immediately
or
adds
losing
a
their
flat
benefits.
$200.
So,
On
with
top of
such
that same
significant
act
changes on the
changes the cost
table,
of living
the
formula,
natural
which could
question
add
is,
another $10
okay,
to $15
what's the
a month.
holdup? What's
And
the
then
current
the Social
status of
Security
all this in
2100 Act
Congress?
kicks in with
So
tax
just to
relief,
sum it all up,
adding another
the SSI
$50 to
Restoration
$75
Act
to
is
their
really
take
this
home.
bundled
You put it all
package of
together,
reforms.
and you're looking
It's
at a
trying
jump
to
of around
raise the benefits to the
$300
poverty
every single
line
month.
and also
And that
massively
monthly
increase
increase
those savings
adds
limits,
up
tackling the
fast.
two
We're
major
talking
issues
about
we've
an
just covered.
additional
And this brings us to the bottom
$3,600 in
line.
income
As
every
of
single
today,
year.
August
For
16th,
somebody on a fixed income,
2025,
that's a
the
16%
SSI Restoration
boost.
Act has
That's
not
not a small
passed.
tweak.
It is
That
still
is a
just
really
a
significant
proposal.
enhancement to
So
their
that
financial
leaves us with a
stability.
final thought for
But
this
what does
explainer.
$3,600
When
a
you
year
look at that
actually do?
documented gap
It
between
means
the benefits
you're no
and the
longer having to
poverty
choose
line,
between
and the
refilling a
fact that these
prescription
rules
and
haven't
buying
been
a full cart
updated
of
in
groceries.
decades,
It means
it
when the
really
water
makes
heater
you
breaks,
wonder,
it's an annoyance,
what level
not a
of
financial
priority
disaster
should
that shoves you
reforming
into debt.
SSI have on the
It gives
national